Hi there, and welcome back to part 11 of All the Young Dudes. This video will cover chapters 101 to 110. Chapter 101, 6th year. New normal. Oh, Shadow Love was quick and clean. Life's a well-thumbed machine. I saw you watching from the stairs. You're everyone that ever cared. Oh lordy, you know I need some loving. I'm moving, touch me. John, I'm only dancing. She turns me on, but I'm only dancing. She turns me on, don't get me wrong, I'm only dancing. Mid-December 1976. After that, it happened often. He never initiated it, he didn't need to. Sirius came to him. Remus would find himself pulled into an empty classroom or their shared bathroom. Once or twice, Sirius even crept quietly into Remus's bed, casting a silencing spell before forcing his shoulders down and running his hands over Remus's body, quaking with desire. Never under the covers, though. That would be queer. He would scurry out as soon as it was over. It almost always happened in a hurry. Remus knew that this was partly the shame of it, but he also knew that it was because they both just needed it so badly. When they were together, their bodies buzzed with the want for each other. No two times were the same. Sometimes they could be confident and bold, other times they were shy and one needed encouragement from the other. Sometimes it wasn't even about getting off, and they were limited to just kissing, or at least Sirius's idea of kissing, which was brutal, fierce, and thankless. Remus's lips felt scorched, burned raw, for days and days. Afterwards they didn't talk about it, but, if time permitted, sat apart from each other and invariably shared a cigarette, silent until they were ready to fall slowly back into their usual jokey banter. Remus felt at those times that Sirius probably would have preferred to be with someone else, a girlfriend or, even worse, James. I'm not the one he wants, Remus told himself pitifully. I'm just the one that's here. The worst part was that he knew that it was enough. If Sirius only ever came to him in darkness and silence, then so be it. It was better than going without, that someone like me gets to have someone like him. He had to share, of course, whether it was Sirius's desire to hide what was going on, or he was simply unable to stay committed to one person. After Avni, there were others. A parade of pretty, bright, cheerful girls, Florence and Daisy and Tessa and Eunice. Remus didn't think any of these trysts were serious, and in the beginning at least, he didn't begrudge Sirius his fun. I never asked for anything more, he told himself. And Remus liked it being private. He had never been someone who liked attention, and he thought that even if it was a given, that whatever he and Sirius were doing was no different to what Sirius did with any of the girls he got attached to, then Remus would probably still prefer that James and Peter did not know. Maybe he could have told them about Grant one day, eventually, but not Sirius. It was too complicated. He liked knowing that he and Sirius could be in a room full of people and no one had a clue what they had been doing only the night before, or even 2 hours earlier. He liked getting away with it. He liked seeing Sirius with a girl and thinking, never mind, later he belongs to me. He was allowed to be happy, after all. He was allowed to have something all for himself, especially as, in other areas in Remus's life, doors were closing and things were being taken away. There was another werewolf attack during the December moon, which fell early in the month that year. Witnesses described more than one creature. They were working as a pack. The ministry was placed on high alert, and the whole school was talking about it. The Marauders didn't bring it up around Remus, not even Sirius. He couldn't blame them. He'd have bitten their head off if anyone had tried to sympathize or be kind about it. Still, he had to put up with everyone else, every other student in the school who had taken to wearing silver jewelry or talking about the best way to fend off a wolf attack. They ought to round them all up. He overheard one 5th year telling anyone who would listen in the dining hall one evening. Keep them locked up, away from normal people. Why can't they tag them? Avni whispered the next afternoon when she, Sirius, Remus, Peter and Lily were watching the Gryffindor Quidditch team practice. I mean, there's already a registry and they can trace underage wizards. Why not put a trace on dangerous animals? It doesn't make sense. They're not animals, Lily hissed through gritted teeth. They're people. Remus kept his eyes on the pitch, so did Sirius. Tell that to the Mondays, Avni replied, straightening her skirt and giving Lily a superior look. Tell that to this latest poor family." She shuffled closer to Sirius on the bench, hugging his arm. "Sirius, darling, I'm cold." "Go in then," he grunted, shaking her off, eyes still on James, shouting something at his keeper. "Excuse me?" Avni frowned. "You heard me." Sirius replied, offhanded, "Piss off." None of them saw much of Avni after that, but it didn't stop other people talking. Remus had to disband his study group early because they all wanted to know if he could recommend any good books on half-breeds and defense against dark creatures. In the end, all he could do was tell them to talk to the Dada teacher, and if they didn't want help with actual schoolwork, then they may as well leave him alone. Lily found Remus working late that night in the common room, trying to catch up on the work he'd missed while in the hospital wing after the moon. He was exhausted and sore and extremely prickly, but she came over and sat beside him anyway, resting a head on his shoulder, an arm around his back. She smelled nice and gave him a gentle squeeze, sighing softly against his collarbone. She didn't speak, but Remus would always be grateful for that. In mid-December, matters worsened. Remus received 2 letters. "Dear Remus, I hope that your 6th year is going well. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but as you may already know, there was an attack during last night's full moon." Remus rolled his eyes at this. Why did adults always think that teenagers didn't read the news, especially when they were in the middle of a war and it concerned them directly? "I have no doubt that Professor McGonagall will be speaking to you soon, but I thought I would get in touch. I have been talking to Alistair Moody, who is concerned for your safety. He tells me that you stay with the Potters every year at Christmas. The Potters are excellent people, and I know that James is a close friend, but Remus, they cannot be relied upon to protect you. They would do everything they could. Of this I have no doubt, but my feeling is that if Greyback attempted to track you down, then the only place he could not find you would be Hogwarts. I am not telling you what to do, of course, but I am begging you to consider your own safety and the safety of those around you. Best wishes, L. Ferox." Well, Ferox was quite clearly telling him what to do, even if he was just passing on instructions from Moody. Remus's heart sank when he finished reading this letter, but there was worse to come. "Mr. Lupin, it has come to our attention that upon your 17th birthday next year, you will be of legal age as defined by your society. While the law of the United Kingdom states that you are still a child, we have been informed that your circumstances override this legislation. As of the 10th of March 1977, you will no longer be under the care of St. Edmund's Boys Reformatory. Any items or financial assets held in trust for you will be returned to you no later than 30 working days following this date. There should be no need for you to return to the premises. We wish you the very best in your future endeavours. Sincerely, Mrs. J. Orwell. Fuck." Remus read this letter only once, then shoved it down into the very bottom of his trunk. He couldn't think about that now. He told the Marauders about the first letter, omitting the Greyback details, of course. He had to. There was no other way to explain why he could not come to London for Christmas. More time for homework, he told himself. He mightn't be the only student staying. The 7th years with Newts coming up might stick around to take advantage of an empty common room. He could probably enjoy quite a pleasant Christmas in the library, if he wanted to. Plus, a Hogwarts Christmas dinner was nothing to turn your nose up at. "It's not bloody fair," James ranted when he heard, "You're no danger to anyone. The full moon isn't until the new year." "It's the pack thing, though," Remus replied, loosening his tie and flopping down on the bed. It had been a very long day of lessons, and he had at least 3 hours of homework ahead of him. "They're worried I'll get captured or join up or something." "I thought Ferox liked you." Sirius frowned, dropping his book bag carelessly in the middle of the room. "He ought to know you'd never join them." "He does know," Remus said, "but he thinks they might force me or, well, none of us really know what might happen if I met another one." James, Peter and Sirius exchanged an uncomfortable look. Remus pulled off his itchy school jumper to give them a moment to think about it. When he resurfaced, his hair fizzing with static, he gave them his biggest grin. "It's fine anyway. I really don't mind. It'll be great to have some peace and quiet. I'm looking forward to a Christmas break from you lot." James chuckled and shook his head. He grabbed his maroon Quidditch duffel bag. None of us believe you, Moony. Right, I've got practice, then an hour for homework, then patrolling with Evans. Anyone else might have reeled off this list of obligations with a weary air of martyrdom, but James looked as though he was having the best day of his life. Fancy it, Black? Nah, you're all right, Prongs. Sirius shook his head. He hadn't stopped looking at Remus since he'd unbuttoned his school shirt. You go on, I'll get a head start on that charm's homework. Yeah, right, James smirked. Who is it tonight, Florence, again? See you. He clattered down the stairs, whistling a chirpy tune. Sirius turned to Peter. You go and watch him then, Pete, if you fancy? Nah, Peter shook his head. He looked worryingly comfortable sitting on his bed, leaning against the headboard with his charms notes scattered before him. Oh, right. You're probably seeing Desi? Nope. He shook his head, licking the end of his quill nib. She's got patrol tonight, and she says we need to get serious about our studies now we're Newt students. Can I do my homework with you two? Remus and Sirius looked at each other. Sirius raised an eyebrow. Remus shrugged. Sirius got up. I tell you what, I forgot to return that book to the library. Better go and... Oh, Moony, while I'm at it, wasn't there another book you told me I should... Oh, right, yeah. Remus jumped up too, struggling into a clean woolen jumper. It's a complicated title. I'd better help you find it. Oh, do you want to relocate to the library then? Peter asked, finally looking up from his notes. No point, Sirius said, as they both bolted for the door. Won't take long. Won't take long, Remus muttered on the stairs. I had to say something. They made it through the common room without interference, but once they were outside in the halls, they were a bit lost. What about the fourth floor, girls? Sirius started. No, Remus snapped. Fine. Charms classroom is free, I think. On Fridays, Flitwick finishes early and there aren't any clubs. How do you know that? Oh, shut up and follow me, Sirius smirked. They put a basic alarm spell on the door and shoved a desk in front of it for good measure. But Friday afternoons were typically pretty safe. Everyone wanted to pretend the classrooms didn't exist. Afterwards, they redressed, smoothed their hair and sat on Flitwick's desk, smoking. We're going to actually have to go to the library now, Remus said, blowing a chain of rings. Nah, Sirius shook his head. Just say they didn't have it in. Well, that would be fine, except I was actually planning to do my charms essay this evening. Sirius rolled his beautiful eyes and tossed his beautiful hair. Remus fought the urge to sigh. The classroom was the same side of the castle as the Quidditch pitch. They could hear the faint but shrill sound of James's captain whistle somewhere below them. Sirius exhaled smoke wistfully. Remus wondered how much he missed playing Quidditch. He wondered if he ought to ask, or whether that would be too much. Moony, are you definitely not coming for Christmas? Yeah, I've got to trust Ferox. He knows me. He knew my dad. He knew your dad? You never told us. I don't have to tell you lot everything. Remus gave an irritated twitch, sucking hard on his cigarette. He worked with him. We had a few chats about it, that's all. Well, if you trust him then. I do. Remus was aware of his tone, but did nothing to temper it. Okay, I was just going to say... Sirius swallowed. Well, I mean I could stay too, over Christmas, at Hogwarts, if it's okay with you. Oh, Remus frowned, caught off guard, and turned to look at Sirius. Do you want to? You shouldn't be stuck all by yourself. James has his family. And Pete, if he gets really desperate. Yeah, but won't they expect you? James's parents, they're mad about you. He caught Sirius's smile at that, a brilliant flash of elation which made Remus's heart beat faster. They can have a Christmas as a family for once without me crashing in. Come on, Moony, don't want to share the common room with me? I'll be quiet and let you study if that's what you really want. He gave a coy smile, and Remus stubbed out his cigarette, leaned over and kissed him hard. He still hadn't really got used to being able to do that. As if, he said, pulling away, revelling in the warm blush in Sirius's cheeks. Chapter 102, 6th Year, Mince Pies. Chapter text. Wednesday, the 15th of December, 1976. Okay, so I probably won't have time for another one of these until next term. Remus told his study group, glancing at the nearby grandfather clock. It was almost 9 o'clock in the evening. He looked up at their eager faces and had to look down at his papers again. It was unnerving, commanding that much attention. "But I'm here almost every night anyway, so if you just had some quick questions—" "Thanks, Lupin," the group chorused as they began to tidy up and disband. "Happy Christmas," he nodded as they dispersed off to their own corners of the common room or else to bed. He fancied an early night himself. It was the last week of term, and he'd pretty much completed all of his work, unless his professors were feeling cruel enough to assign more in the last days before Christmas. He yawned and stretched, leaning back on his chair with his eyes closed. Ahem. Someone still sitting at the table cleared their throat awkwardly. Remus opened his eyes, embarrassed, and swung forward on his chair. "Oh, sorry, I thought everyone had gone." "Sorry," Christopher replied, clutching a book. "I just wanted to say Merry Christmas." Remus felt an awkward twist of relief and guilt in his midsection. Poor Christopher. "Thanks, Merry Christmas to you too. Big plans?" The younger boy shrugged. "Just family. You?" "Staying here." "Oh, not by yourself?" Sirius Black is staying too." "Of course, I heard about the stuff with his family." Remus did not want to talk about Sirius with Christopher at all, but least of all about the Black family. Christopher was pure blood too, and likely knew more than Sirius was comfortable with. "Well," Christopher made to stand, "see you in January, I suppose." "Wait," Remus said quickly, reaching out but not touching him. Christopher stood up but looked down on Remus, his eyes hopeful. Remus looked down. "I'm sorry about the way I spoke to you before the summer. I was a right git." Christopher did not dispute this, but he smiled. "That's all right. I hope it wasn't something I did?" "No," Remus shook his head vehemently. He wished Christopher would sit down. "No, I promise it was just me being a moody tosser. I had some other stuff going on. I shouldn't have taken it out on you." "Okay, well, thanks for saying so." Remus smiled, feeling a bit better. Christopher bit his lip, then said, "So, do you fancy a visit to Hogsmeade in the new year? The bookshop has a January sale on, or we could just get a butterbeer." "Sorry, Chris, I can't." Remus felt horrible, and he saw Christopher's face fall. "Right, you're probably going with Potter and Black and what's his face?" "Peter, but I'm not. Actually, I can't go to Hogsmeade. I'm banned." "Oh, really?" "Really." Remus nodded earnestly, grateful that he didn't have to lie. "Is it to do with why you're not a prefect anymore?" "Yeah." "Okay, that was a lie. But who was it hurting?" "Wow, okay." Christopher raised his eyebrows, and Remus wasn't sure if he was impressed or mildly concerned. "Mooney!" Sirius's voice wailed down the stairs from the boys' dorms. "James is throwing snowballs at me! Stop him!" Remus laughed and began getting up. "Snowballs?" Christopher said wryly. "In your bedroom?" They open the window and scrape it off the roof. "Help us, Mooney!" Peter cried. "We need reinforcements." "I can't believe you're friends with that lot," Christopher said with a bristle of indignation. "They're so immature." "So am I," Remus shrugged, rolling up his sleeves and standing up. "I'm coming, lads!" he yelled at the top of his voice, marching towards the staircase. Sunday, the 19th of December, 1976. It was a bitterly cold winter that year, and snow began to fall early over the castle. The Marauders used this to great effect, and James perfected a spell which enabled the suits of armor which lined most of the classroom corridors to spit snowballs from their visors at various intervals. Remus liked the cold, or maybe he just liked wrapping up warm and sitting by the fire. In the winter, at least, no one asked why he wore long sleeves all the time, and he was excited, maybe more excited than he had ever been for a Christmas holiday. He loved seeing the Potters, and he loved their house and their village, and being witness to a proper family for once. But to be alone with Sirius for an entire week, that was something he could never have imagined happening even 2 months earlier. They walked James and Peter down to the edge of the grounds, as far as Remus could go. "You sure?" James asked one last time. "Ferox never said you weren't allowed, and Mum and Dad honestly wouldn't mind at all." "Next year, hopefully," Remus shrugged. "It might all be over by then, and I couldn't live with myself if anything happened to your family because of me." "Black? You're really going to say no to Mum's mince pies?" "Ah, but I'm not, my dear Prongs." Sirius grinned from behind his red and gold scarf. "She sent some ahead first thing this morning. I've got an entire tin full." "Foiled again," James smirked. He hugged Sirius, and then Remus, who was surprised by it. He couldn't remember if they'd ever hugged before. "Go on, get on the train, eh?" Sirius punched him in the shoulder. "You'll have Evans all to yourself." James winked at him, then hurried away, Pete scurrying along behind him, waving to Remus and Sirius. The two boys staying behind stood there for a little while, watching the black-cloaked students, trudging through the pure white snow, all talking merrily about their plans for the break, the presents they looked forward to, and their eagerness to see their families. "See ya, Remus," Christopher grinned at him, pink-cheeked as he strolled past. "Have a good one." "You too," Remus nodded, smiling back. He felt much better, now the air had been cleared. "That kid again," Sirius murmured. "Who is he?" "I've told you before, he's a fifth year in my study group." "Right, he looks like a complete drip. He's okay." Remus smiled to himself, hoping Sirius didn't notice. A nasty voice came from behind them. "What's wrong? Potters kick you out too?" Remus reached for his wand as they turned, and half expected to see Snape. He was surprised to find that was Regulus Black, standing there in the snow, face pinched with cold. "No," Sirius replied hotly. "I'm just staying here this year." "Why?" Regulus asked bluntly. He narrowed his eyes at his brother, as if waiting for the punchline. "None of your business, that's why. Now run along, little Reggie. I'm sure Mummy's waiting." Regulus tutted and raised an eyebrow, as if to show that he would not rise to Sirius's bait. Remus hated it and clenched his fists, which Regulus either saw or sensed, because he gave Remus a sharp look, and Remus knew he was remembering their last altercation back in January. The younger boy visibly steeled himself, then spoke directly to Remus. "Not a prefect anymore, Loony Lupin? I wonder why. Something to do with my delinquent brother, perhaps? Surely that greasy half-blood Severus wasn't telling the truth?" Remus might have swung for him if he wasn't busy stopping Sirius from doing the same. They struggled together in the snow, Sirius snarling, "Take that back, you brown-nosing little—" Fortunately, Remus was stronger. Regulus walked off, cackling towards Hogsmeade and the train. "I can curse him from here," Sirius growled once Remus let him go. "I'd rather you didn't," Remus replied. He turned back to the snow-capped castle. "Look," he encouraged, "we've got it practically to ourselves." "Yeah," Sirius said, distracted, still shooting glance back at his brother's footsteps. "Come on then, let's go in. Freezing my bollocks off." His bad mood lasted until lunchtime, when they went down to the Great Hall. "Blimey," Sirius said as they entered the room. It was almost completely empty, with only 3 students, a Slytherin 7th year and 2 Ravenclaw 6th years, seated at the same table at the head of the room. "I reckon it's the war," Remus whispered as they approached the table. "Parents want their kids home this Christmas." "Just you and me then, Moony," Sirius grinned, "the orphans of Gryffindor Tower." Despite the small party, the hall had been decked out in silver and gold, with glistening streamers hanging like angel hair from every rafter, a dazzling tree that seemed to glow from somewhere within its branches, and a flock of jolly red-breasted robins enchanted to circle the room and whistle familiar Christmas tunes. Remus thought that Flitwick had really outdone himself this year. Sirius sat beside him rather than across from him, as usual. They didn't make much conversation with the rest of the party. The 2 Ravenclaws were obsessively quizzing each other on arithmancy, and the Slytherin was deep in conversation with Professor Slughorn. "Remember first year?" Sirius said as the food appeared. The house elves clearly weren't breaking for Christmas. "It was just you and me for Christmas then too?" "Yeah," Remus smiled at his shepherd's pie, warmed by the memory. He had spent every Christmas with Sirius since he was 11. Electric Warrior. "We'll have to have a listen later." They did too. They stretched out on the rug in front of the fireplace and lay on their backs, playing the album at full volume. Sirius played Monolith twice because he knew it was Remus's favourite, and Remus tolerated 3 replays of Jeepster for Sirius's sake. You slide so good, with bones so fair, you've got the universe reclining in your hair, 'cause you're my babe. Full, warm and content, Remus quietly drifted to sleep to the sound of Mark Bolan's pretty voice and twanging guitar. He woke up a little later with a sore back. He turned his head and found he was alone on the carpet, and the record had stopped playing. Sitting up stiffly, Remus looked around for Sirius, who was seated a little way away, curled up in an armchair, whispering into his compact mirror. Remus relaxed, leaning back on his elbows, and watched gently for a while, the firelight warming Sirius's features with a fine glow, softening his sharper angles into supple Grecian marble. He was so achingly beautiful. Obviously everybody knew that. Sirius's beauty wasn't just for Remus, but sometimes it felt like it was. It had nothing to do with wanting Sirius then, it was something much more. It drove Remus crazy. Eventually Sirius whispered a goodbye to the mirror and snapped it closed. He smiled at Remus and slowly unfurled, stretching his long limbs out over the sides of the armchair. Remus watched, unmoving. "How's James?" "Fine," Sirius replied, that look growing in his eyes that Remus had come to recognize as a signal that something wonderful about to happen. Sirius got up from the chair and sauntered over to Remus. "Misses me, obviously." "Obviously," Remus said, repeating without listening, just watching Sirius's approach. He towered over him, the firelight now blazing across him like a flare, streaks of gold flickering in his pupils. He sank to his knees astride Remus's still-prone body and bent forward. Not too far, not so far that Remus didn't have to stretch a little to close that extra space between them. He didn't mind. It was always worth the effort. They were used to each other now. Remus had thought it had been good in the beginning, the very first time. But after a month of secretive exploration, they had developed an intimate knowledge that Remus hadn't known you could have with another person. He felt as attuned to the various movements and reactions of Sirius's body as he was with his own. He knew the language in every gasp or tightening, the code in his kisses, or the shapes Sirius traced on his own scarred skin. It made the moment they parted all the more difficult, though. Sirius would be quiet at first, and Remus would just listen to his breathing, the hitch in his chest, the sighs of overwhelming calm, and he would wait for it. The laugh, the cheeky grin, the slap on the thigh that told Remus it was over and they were back to normal. "Fancy a mince pie? I'm starving." There it was. Sirius leapt up, grabbing his jeans and wriggling into them before waving his wand. "Axio biscuit tin." The big royal blue tin came flying down the stairs and came at Sirius so hard it nearly knocked him over. "Oof!" "Your wand work is too broad," Remus said, buttoning his own trousers and pulling on a t-shirt. "Too warm for a jumper." Sirius tossed him a mince pie, sitting back in the armchair, then rubbed his knee, wincing. "Carpet burn." "You should see my back," Remus replied as if they were discussing the weather. He settled into the sofa opposite Sirius. They ate their pies quietly. When he finished, Sirius licked the sticky fruit off his fingers and brushed the crumbs from his torso. "Aren't you going to put your shirt back on?" Remus inquired, folding the tin from his pie into neat triangular portions. "Nah, no one's here." "Yeah, but still—" Remus made a fruitless gesture. Sirius smirked. "Prude!" Remus laughed, flicking the folded-up tin at him. "Tart." Chapter 103, 6th year, 12 nights. I sing with impertinence, shading impermanent chords with my words. I borrowed your time, and I'm sorry I called, but the thought just occurred. That we're nobody's children at all, after all. Thursday, the 20th of December, 1976. Sirius sang in the shower. Remus wasn't sure if this was a new thing, or whether he had been doing it for ages, and Remus simply hadn't noticed. He'd typically been avoiding Sirius's showering times. Anyway, as Remus dressed, he listened and smiled. He didn't have a bad voice, really, nothing special, but in tune. He was obsessed with the Doors at the moment and had perfected an imitation of Jim Morrison's deep American holler. Come on, come on, come on now, touch me, Barbie, he bellowed over the hissing of the taps. It might have been endearing, even alluring, if he didn't spoil it by singing along with the trumpets too. Bada bada. He exited the bathroom in a fog of steam, his skin flushed, his shirt damp from his hair. What? He cocked an eyebrow at Remus. No applause. Remus rolled his eyes, opening the dorm room door. Hurry up, I'm starving. It felt weird to leave the isolation of Gryffindor Tower, where they had already made themselves at home, and to enter the rest of the castle, where everything was the same. They were early to breakfast, and the two Ravenclaws, a girl and a boy, sat closer to them this time. Isn't it ridiculous that they serve this much food when there are only 5 students? The girl, who had large cat-eye glasses and a mass of freckles, remarked, "It seems so wasteful." The plates in front of them had filled with fried eggs, bacon, sausages, black pudding, baked beans, fried tomatoes and toast, not to mention cereal, porridge and fruit juices. Nah, Sirius replied, watching Remus pile up his plate. You've clearly never seen Moony here eat. Shut up, Remus replied, his mouth already full. Still, the Ravenclaws watched, fascinated, until Remus was too embarrassed to eat anymore. Fortunately, at that moment, a distraction arrived in the form of the morning post owls. 1 landed in front of Remus, 3 in front of Sirius. You're popular, the Ravenclaw boy leaned over. He was skinny and smallish with a beaky nose. Don't encourage him, Remus said. His own package was soft and wrapped in lavender-coloured paper. It was from Lily, he had no doubt. Sirius had 5 or 6 brightly coloured envelopes, none red, Remus noted with relief. No howlers from Walpurga this year. We're going ice skating before lunch, the Ravenclaw girl smiled brightly. The lake's frozen over. Want to come? Sounds good, Sirius nodded, tossing his unopened post aside. Remus collected it up before they left the breakfast table and took it up to the room with them. Are these all Christmas cards? He asked, flicking through. Oh, yeah, I think so. Sirius shrugged, opening his wardrobe and rummaging through the bottom, pulling out drawers and old shoes he didn't wear anymore. Who are they from? Whoever. Remus frowned, then caught sight of something on Sirius's bedside table, another pile of unopened cards. He started opening them. Sirius clearly wasn't interested. Dear Sirius, have a wonderful Christmas, lots of kisses, Imelda. To the boy who holds my heart, Merry Christmas and all my love, S. Darling Sirius, please meet me in Hogsmeade under the mistletoe for a kiss, and maybe more. Emmeline. My raven-haired prince, I cannot rest until I'm in your arms. Sirius, what? Came his muffled response. He was half buried in the back of his wardrobe now, on his hands and knees. These are all from girls? Aha! He finally reappeared, leaning back on his ankles, holding a pair of ice skates aloft. I knew I brought a pair during first year. Are you telling me your feet haven't grown since you were 11? They have a growing charm on them, Sirius explained, dusting them off. They get bigger to fit me. Only the best for the blacks. Clever, these cards, though. Oh, those. What do you open them for? You want to be careful. One of them squirted perfume at me. Perfume. He pulled a face. Are these all girls you've... Really, Moony, I'm flattered. As legendary as I'm sure my stamina is, no. They're just girls. They send me nonsense all the time. All the time? Oh, come on, what are you, jealous? Sirius ruffled Remus's hair. They're just cards. I suppose... Now, let's get you some skates. I don't want any, I'll break my neck. You'll be fine, I'll show you how to do it. Remus picked up the pile again and flicked through it. There must be 20 here, altogether. Look, Remus, why don't we find you a girlfriend? Then you won't be so interested in my love life. What? Remus stared at Sirius. He was being quite genuine, a look of mild concern on his face. Remus's heart sank. Really? Yeah, I reckon that freckly Ravenclaw likes you. Or Marlene. What about Marlene? She's pretty nice, likes you. She offered to snog me once, Remus said, but shook his head. It was a joke, though. Marlene's not interested in me. I don't need a girlfriend. Don't knock it till you've tried it, Sirius winked. Right, let's see what we can do about these skates. Ice skating was marginally better than flying a broom, but not much. The lake was completely frozen, but Remus couldn't shake the thought it might crack at any moment, and kept patting his pocket to check he could reach his wand. Sirius obviously was a natural. So was the Ravenclaw boy, Arnold, and the pair of them were soon racing each other up and down the length of the ice. Remus watched them nervously, trying not to wobble. Here, the freckly girl, Tina, glided over to him, smiling kindly. Put your hands on my shoulders if you want and watch my feet. He did so gratefully, standing behind her as she dragged him steadily around in a small circle. He thought he was getting the hang of it. I wonder if the squid's okay, he said, after they'd been a bit too quiet for a while. I never even thought about that. Does it hibernate, do you think? Tina peered down at the ice with some interest. I don't think I've actually ever read anything about the squid. Me neither, Remus replied, letting go of her shoulders and attempting to do a few meters unaided. Professor Ferox liked it, though. I saw him feeding it once. Really? She looked up at him, earnest and curious. What did he feed it? Remus shrugged. No idea. Something nasty-looking. I miss Ferox, she sighed. He really brought his lessons to life. I ended up dropping care of magical creatures, taking an extra course in goblin finance instead. Oh, that sounds, interesting. It is, she nodded without a trace of irony. I can lend you a book if you like. Thanks. After lunch, Remus and Sirius returned to the tower. Remus noticed that the pile of cards had disappeared, but he didn't mention it. He lit the small bedroom fire and looked for a thicker jumper to wear. Still cold? Sirius asked, yawning. Freezing, Remus replied, pulling on a second pair of socks and raising his hands to the fire. Should have moved about a bit more. Gets the blood pumping. Still, his tone changed, turned sly and teasing. You had a nice chat with Freckles? Tina, she's interested in goblin finance. Excellent, you can marry rich? Remus threw a slipper at him. Oi, Sirius barked with laughter. I'm just trying to help you get out a bit, Moony. You ought to have other interests outside of that bloody study group. I think, if anything, I would be doing more studying if I started going out with Tina, which I'm not going to. Remus blew into his cupped hands, then held them up to the fire again. The cold just seemed to seep in and settle there. He turned to look at Sirius, who was leaning against his headboard, staring, his lips curled into a wicked smile. Bed's warm. Friday, the 21st of December, 1976. Bloody Regulus. It was 2 days ago, get over it. He's such a prick. I know, left a bit. I can't go any further left, there's no room. Careful, not there. Oops, anyway, you should have let me hit him. You weren't going to hit him. You were going to break a knuckle. You can't punch. Yes, I can. No, you can't. Look, can you please concentrate? You keep missing. I've punched loads of people. Oops, sorry. You've play-fought with James, not the same thing. Oh, and you know how to punch, do you, Moony? Yeah, I do, actually. Aha, I win. It's not fair. Can't we get closer? No, that's cheating. Oh, fine, I forgot you were a stickler for rules, Prefect Lupin. Remus folded his arms and let Sirius rant. He had won fair and square. They'd been playing this new game for about 2 hours now, and Remus was by far the best at it. He had never beaten Sirius at anything on the first go. It was an excellent feeling, and he was going to lord it over him. The game involved levitating various items they'd found in the common room, gobstones, chocolate frogs, quills, slippers, and firing them at speed through the goals. Constructed by cutting various sized holes in Peter and James's bedsheets, which they had strung up across the common room, dividing it. Remus had had reservations about cutting up his friends' sheets, out of boredom, but Sirius had reasoned that they couldn't very well cut holes in their own bedsheets, which were in use. The best part was that they never had to tidy up. Once they had got everything through the goals, all they needed to do was walk through the sheets and start again on the other side. This they began to do now, crossing to the half of the room with the fireplace in it. It was cosy. "I wonder if this is what camping is like," Remus said thoughtfully. "Never been," Sirius replied. "James thought it was funny our family never did it." "I always wanted to," Remus mused, beginning to levitate a crystal ball someone had carelessly let roll under the couch. "But I liked the idea of anywhere that wasn't St. Edmund's." He frowned slightly, having surprised himself. Why had he brought up St. Edmund's? He never talked about it in front of anyone at Hogwarts. Sirius didn't seem fazed. "Yeah, I don't blame you," he said then, glancing at the floating crystal ball. "You're going to smash that." "No, I'm not. I'm aiming at the big settee," Remus demonstrated, reeling back his wand and then flicking it, sending the crystal ball whizzing through the very smallest hole, landing with a quiet thump on the other side. Remus smirked at Sirius, who shook his head in disbelief. "It's scary how good at this you are. Get you on a broom and you'd make a bloody good chaser." "No thanks, your go." Sirius selected a gobstone. They were easier to levitate but much harder to aim. He was terrible at understanding his own limits. "Did you play that muggle game at St. Edmund's?" Sirius asked, casually, firing the gobstone too hard and missing the sheet altogether, sending it over the top. "Foul," Remus said. "What muggle game?" "With all the running about and kicking, we saw them playing it when over the summer." "Oh, football. No, I never liked it. Had too many bruises already." "Yeah, sorry, I didn't think, of course." Sirius went a bit quiet after that. Remus knew him well enough to recognize that he was building up to something, a question or a declaration. In the meantime, Remus started shooting quills like darts through each hole in the sheets. Finally, Sirius had gathered up whatever courage he needed or prepared whichever words. "Is it really awful living there?" Remus lowered his wand. He hadn't ever complained about St. Edmund's, not in front of the Marauders or anyone except for Grant, because Grant knew. He was about to say, "Nah, it's fine, really," and shrug it off, but something stopped him. That was a lie, and there was no need to lie just now. "It's not awful, but it is noisy. You always have to watch your back, and no one really cares about you much. They have to make sure you don't die, or get arrested, or starve, or whatever, but they don't actually care." He wasn't in the mood to play anymore. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his cigarettes, lighting one with his wand tip, then tossing the box to Sirius. Sirius just held it, running his thumb over a loose bit of foil poking out from the join in the hinge. "I know how that feels," he murmured. That was all he said, and it was enough at the time. He quickly looked up and grinned. "Look what I can do!" He slid a cigarette out of the packer and placed it between his lips. A look of concentration flashed in his eyes for a moment, then he snapped his fingers and the cigarette lit itself. His grin widened around the fag, and he looked at Remus for praise. "Blimey," Remus smiled. "Clever you." Saturday, the 22nd of December, 1976. "What are you doing?" "What's it look like?" Remus replied sternly over the top of his textbook. He'd spent a peaceful few hours all by himself in bed until Sirius had marched in smelling of snow and hot chocolate. He'd gone ice skating again, and Remus had begged off this time, looking for some quiet. "You're not studying at Christmas?" Sirius flopped down beside him on the bed, looking scandalized. "It's not Christmas, it's not even Christmas Eve, it's just a normal day, and I like reading, thank you very much." Remus shifted away from him, rolling back and raising the book over his head to read. "How times have changed, eh, Mooney?" Sirius chortled, pulling off his socks and thick woolen jumper. It was one the Potters had bought him. This year, Sirius's clothes had been much more practical and comfortable than before, hardly anything specially tailored or finely cut now. He was still very obviously an aristocrat born and bred. That was clear in his bearing, in every enunciated phrase he spoke, but he was happier, and that showed just as much. "I remember a boy who hated reading and homework, and I remember someone who loved it and came top in every subject." Remus turned to him finally. "What happened? Didn't like the competition?" "Pfft, I could run rings around the lot of you, if I wanted to." This wasn't a boast. Sirius had always been exceptional when it came to intuitive magic and intensely diligent at research, when it suited him. So why don't you? Rather do other stuff, he shrugged. The conversation had hit a dead end. That hardly ever happened with Sirius unless you brought up his family. And this certainly had something to do with the Blacks, or at least Sirius thought it did. They wanted him to be in Slytherin, so he ended up in Gryffindor. They wanted him to be a good pure-blood heir, so he befriended the Potters and ran away. They wanted him to get the best marks in his exams to prove that purebloods were better than anyone else, so he used his talents exclusively in ways that would annoy them. Remus returned to his book. 2 lines down, Sirius gave a long sigh. "I'm bored." "Go and play chess with the dynamic duo," Remus replied, rereading the 2nd line. "Ugh, not that bored. Spent all morning with them. They're okay, but Merlin, everything's so literal." "Talk to James, then. He's got family visiting or something. We're talking after dinner. Anyway, not in the mood for talking." Remus put down his book. "Oh? I don't want to disturb you, though," Sirius said innocently, edging closer. "It can wait." Sunday, the 23rd of December, 1976. "Show me how to throw a punch, then." "Seriously," Remus sighed. "Deadly serious." The other boy waggled his eyebrows. Remus groaned. "Oh, go on." Sirius laughed at his face. "Show me. Teach me something, Professor Lupin." They were lounging in their pyjamas in the common room. Gryffindor Tower was still being cleaned nightly by the house elves, but the funny little creatures had had the sense to leave up the gold sheets, even if they'd tidied away all of the projectiles. The effect was that of a weird screen blocking out the windows on the other side, except for 5 pools of winter sunlight which streamed in through the cut-out holes. "Okay, but you need something to hit that you won't hurt yourself on." They ended up finding an empty bit of wall and performing a softening charm on it. Sirius stood there eagerly, awaiting instruction. "Make a fist," Remus said. "No, okay, not like that. Yeah, put your thumb there, unless you want it broken. Okay, now you want it at shoulder level. Yeah, then, Remus eventually resorted to demonstrating a few times on the wall before physically repositioning Sirius's arms in order to get the angle right. "Legs apart. Don't lean forward so much. Okay, try it now." It took about 20 minutes, but in the end, Remus deemed Sirius at least competent enough to give a black eye. "Where'd you learn this?" Sirius panted, elated with his success. "St. Edmund's." "Oh, yeah." He ducked his head. "No, not like that." Remus shook his head quickly, realizing that Sirius was probably imagining him squaring off against a group of huge, tough muggles. "Some of the older boys taught me a few summers ago. They were all a bit rough, liked to fight, but they were nice to me." "Ah," Sirius's eyes gleamed with the light of understanding. "Was this the year you began your foray into organized crime?" "My what? Oh yeah, the fags. Yep, that summer. I'll never forget you stomping onto the train in those boots." "Ugh, don't." Remus covered his eyes with his hands. He cringed every time he remembered the way he had acted. "I was so obnoxious." "I didn't think so. Anyway, you had good reason." Sirius rubbed his knuckles. They looked red from hitting the wall so many times, and Remus fought the urge to take Sirius's hand in his own and kiss every finger. "Did you, ever learn any more about Greyback?" Sirius asked, tentatively, snapping Remus out of his daze. "Yeah, bits and pieces." He didn't want to clam up, but he did anyway, sitting down again and picking up a newspaper just to have something to hold. "Mooney, I know you hate talking about him. No, it's fine." He wasn't fooling anyone. "You don't think the attacks over the last few months?" Remus looked up at him, just to check his expression. He looked anxious but not frightened. At least, not of Remus. "Yeah," he confirmed with a curt nod. "It was him. Moody told me." "Shit. Yeah, shit. You don't think he'd come after you?" "Don't see why he would." The bare-faced lie should have shocked him, or at least caused a pang of guilt. But this was justified, Remus told himself. This was to protect his friends. He touched the scar on his side over the top of his pyjamas. The fabric was thin, and if he pressed lightly, he could feel the dimples and puckers in his flesh made by those dreadful teeth. It's not like he can do anything else to me now. The worst's already happened. Mooney. It wasn't a question or a request, and they both let it hang in the air. Monday, the 24th of December, 1976. Do we have any weed? Sirius asked as they walked back from breakfast on Christmas Eve. They dodged yet another chess tournament with the Ravenclaws. Remus didn't actually mind the idea, but Sirius had decided they were intensely boring and not to be tolerated. When you say we, Remus replied dryly, do you mean me? Fine, do you have any weed? No, but you know where some is. Maybe. That's my little delinquent. Come on then, show me. Remus sighed. We'd have to go outside to the greenhouses and probably smoke it there too. I don't want the house elves getting a whiff. It's too cold, I'd rather not. Come on, Mooney. You haven't been outside in ages. I know, that was deliberate. Come on. Sirius was dragging him by the sleeve now, and because there wasn't much else to do, and he did quite fancy a spliff, Remus allowed it. They summoned their cloaks and left the castle, hurrying through the thinning sheet of snow down to the greenhouses. Behind them, buried in a tin box, Remus unearthed the illicit buds, wrapped up in twists of brown paper. He would have to pay back whoever it belonged to, if they found out, of course. The greenhouses themselves had no snow on the roofs, being warm enough inside. We could go in there, Sirius suggested, shivering. Are you mental? Spout comes down here twice a day to check on the mandrakes. It has to be somewhere else. The shack. Fuck that, Remus growled without thinking. Sirius looked at him surprised, and he shook his head apologetically. I hate it there. Please, somewhere else? Okay, sorry. I know. He grabbed Remus by the wrist this time, his ungloved hands still miraculously warm. Remus worked out where they were going before they got there, and it was actually sort of brilliant. They were just approaching the statue of the hump-backed, one-eyed witch when the seventh-year Slytherin student turned a corner at the other end of the hallway. They stopped still, probably looking extremely guilty. What are you two doing? He asked, tilting his head, weighing them up. Just going for a stroll, Sirius replied haughtily. It's a free castle. Whatever. The Slytherin rolled his eyes, bored. He kept walking past them, robe sweeping. Remus pulled out the map as soon as he was out of sight and watched the little dot with his name keep on towards the library. Perseus Flint. Bluch! Sirius pulled a face when he saw it. I think he's a relative. They entered the secret passage, cast an illuminating spell, and rolled up their cloaks so that they could sit comfortably on the stone floor. Should have brought the record player, Sirius said. We could get quite comfy here. Don't know why I never thought of it before. You and your cave-dwelling fantasies, Remus humoured him, laying out all of his paraphernalia. He liked rolling. It was a pleasant process. We're not spending the rest of Christmas in here? They did spend the next few hours there, though, minds drifting, murmuring stupid jokes to each other or humming half-remembered songs. By lunchtime they were ravenous and giggled all the way to the Great Hall. Sirius was red-eyed, pale, with an inane grin, and Remus knew he wasn't much better off. He was just thankful Dumbledore wasn't there. He'd see through them in an instant. They were wrangled into a game of chess after lunch once the table had been cleared, and Sirius actually became very competitive in his attempt to beat Tina, who must have been the reigning Ravenclaw champion. Remus was finding it difficult to concentrate himself and eventually lay his head down on the table and fell into a deep sleep. He was nudged awake about an hour later. "You're snoring, Mooney," Sirius chuckled. "Are you all right?" Tina asked, her inquisitive face peering across the chessboard. She had won, it seemed. Oh, yeah." He tried to sit upright, feeling a twinge in his back as he did so. "Sorry, must not have slept enough last night." "You do look quite pale," she continued, her eyes raked over him analytically. "Perhaps you ought to go to bed for a bit. Sirius said you were busy all morning on herbology, so I'm not surprised if you're tired." Sirius began to giggle compulsively, and Remus elbowed him hard in the ribs. "Yeah, I will go for a lie down, cheers." He went back to the tower slowly, at first in case Sirius decided to follow him, and then because his hip hurt from sleeping in a stupid position. His head was clearer, and he decided to take a hot bath, to see if that would help at all. He took his arithmancy textbook into the bathroom with him, hoping it would stop him from falling asleep again. He'd only been in the water for 10 minutes when Sirius's voice broke into the dorm room. "Mooney?" "I'm in the bath," he called back. The door opened. Remus tutted. "Didn't say you could come in." "Nothing I haven't seen," Sirius replied archly. Remus blinked. Was Sirius actually commenting on the recent turn their relationship had taken, or was this just another off-handed remark? Perhaps he talked to James in the bath. Remus wouldn't be surprised. Sirius leaned casually against the sink. "James gave me the password to the prefect's baths, if you'd rather go there." "I'm fine here, thanks." "Okay, I've had an idea. Does it involve smoking weed in a tunnel?" "Yeah, brilliant. Not just that, though. I fancy an outing." "Do you?" Remus smirked, closing his eyes and leaning back. "Here we go." "How does the hog's head sound?" Remus opened his eyes. "It sounds completely mad." "Excellent," Sirius grinned. "We'll go after dinner, then." Remus made half-hearted attempts to change Sirius's mind, but when a plan had been concocted, it was generally pretty much set in stone, particularly if it involved breaking school rules. "I'm not allowed into Hogsmeade. Mooney, it's Christmas Eve." So they went. After sharing a long joint in the tunnel, at the Honeyduke's end, obviously, Remus didn't fancy being stoned for the long walk through the passage, they crept up into the sweet shop, pocketing a few chocolate frogs on the way, and out into the dark, empty high street. The Three Broomsticks was the only place that looked at all welcoming, but Sirius reckoned Rosmerta might shop them to McGonagall if she saw them in there. "Which would be total bollocks," he huffed. "I'm 17. I should be allowed to do what I like." The Hog's Head was not nearly as inviting as the Three Broomsticks, but it still had a kind of atmosphere. The clientele were private, huddled in groups, talking amongst themselves, and the barman surly, but he served Sirius and Remus without question, and they were able to find a table and stools without too much of a problem. There was an odd smell hanging about the place, something Remus liked a lot, but couldn't quite place. It stirred a strange sort of wanting inside him, which he tried to drown in whiskey. They drank a lot and quickly, caught up in each other's overexcitement. "I haven't had a drink since Halloween," Remus said daringly. I was so sick that night," Sirius laughed. "I don't even remember half of it." "I do." Remus bristled. Sirius caught his look and the smile fell from his face. His brows knit and he looked down at his half-empty goblet. "Of course I remember that part, Remus." He felt a bit guilty after that. A small part of him still wanted to punish Sirius for the hurt he'd caused, even if on the whole he wanted to forget it all and just be happy. Alcohol is fortunately the ideal solution for this particular problem. At least Remus thought so. He smiled broadly. "First time I got pissed," he drained his glass, "was that summer I got the boots and all that gear. I got so off my head I thought I was going to die." "I got tipsy at a family banquet when I was 13, Sirius mused, ordering 2 more cups with a snap of his fingers, "but not as drunk as I got for your birthday that year. Still, it was all the same to Mother, and out came the wand." He made a wide slashing movement with his own wand hand and imitated his mother's sharp, precise voice. "A black air shows proper comportment at all times, //." Remus winced, thinking about Sirius's calves. Sirius glanced at him sideways, mid-slash. "Sorry," he said, folding his arms as the whiskies arrived. "It's not funny. I don't know why I act like it is." "You're out now," Remus said seriously. "You don't ever have to go back." "Yeah," Sirius slurred, slouching in his seat. "It's all Reg's mess now, nasty little so-and-so. Do you know how many times I took the blame for him? How many times I stood between... He used to be a proper little crybaby, but Mother hates crying. She says it makes men sissies, it makes them... Well, whatever, some bollocks. But anyway, Reg would cry, and I would do something worse to distract her, and then she'd do her thing, //. His eyes were bright and his cheeks were pink. You know, if either of us had just learnt not to get upset, then maybe. But I suppose Reg learnt in the end, cold-hearted fucker. He took a big gulp. "Sorry, I shouldn't moan. Especially not to you. You know all about my bloody lack of self-control. It took Remus a moment or two to realize that Sirius was talking about the Snape incident. He didn't want to talk about that. The conversation was melancholy enough as it was, and he knew what happened when you let the drink get you down. "It's fine," he mumbled. "Probably a good thing anyway. I hardly ever cry. I think I lost the ability at some point. Maybe I'm like Reg." "You are not like Reg," Sirius said, vehemently squeezing Remus's knee. Remus smiled at him dopily, and Sirius withdrew his hand quickly, looking around furtively in case the gesture had been noticed. "Can you smell that?" Remus asked, feeling very drunk now. He stretched like a cat. It was so familiar, so deep and fascinating, like prey or... No, it was just out of reach. "Stale beer. B.O.?" Sirius suggested, making himself laugh. "No, it's an animal or something." "Sorry, mate," he shrugged. "I could turn into a dog and have a sniff, but I think I'm too drunk to remember how to turn back." They left the pub shortly after that. The scent had infected Remus, unshakable and overwhelmingly desirable. He felt more than drunk, almost wolfish. He transferred this feeling to Sirius and pushed him against the wall in the darkness of an alleyway, kissing him fiercely, pressing his hips against him. Eventually, Sirius had to push him away, using more force than normal. "Hey," he whispered, "not here, someone'll see." They dragged each other back to Honeyduke's, through the door and into the cellar, which Remus would have been more than happy with, but Sirius wouldn't touch him again until they were inside the dark, dank tunnel. They hadn't been together like this before after drinking, and neither of them had the presence of mind to light their wands, so it was pitch black, but Remus was hot with the whiskey, and Sirius was just as eager as him now they were alone, and it was the same as it had been, only better, more urgent and fluid and messy, and Remus felt a surge of courage before pulling away and sinking to his knees, holding Sirius in place, and it was nerve-wracking, but God, so worth it to hear that surprised gasp. "What are you?" "Oh." Christmas Day, 1976. As was to be expected, both boys awoke on Christmas Day with thumping hangovers. "Tell me there's a cure, Mooney," Sirius wailed from his bed. "You're the one taking healing lessons." "You're the one taking potions," Remus grumbled from under his pillow. "Pain is a potion thing. I do cuts and abrasions." "Useless." "Shut up." But it was no good. He was awake now, and there was nothing either of them could do about it. He clambered out from his bedsheets, head thudding at twice the tempo as he hobbled across the room to the bathroom. "Cold shower," he mumbled at Sirius's bed. "Then breakfast. Fried eggs, trust me." They couldn't face opening presents and left it, instead stumbling down to eat without combing their hair or making much effort to look smart at all. Dumbledore was there and smiled at them benevolently as they took their seats at the table. "Happy Christmas, one and all," he boomed cheerily, apparently oblivious to Sirius and Remus's wincing. Breakfast did improve things somewhat, at least it settled their stomachs, and they eagerly returned to the tower afterwards to open presents. Remus got the usual assortment of quills, chocolates, books and knitwear as usual, and was very pleased to receive them. Nothing from Matron this year. He supposed she'd decided to cut ties early, seeing as after his 17th birthday he would not be expected to return to St. Edmund's S. He pushed that thought down with a cigarette. James got in touch shortly after that, through the compact mirrors, and they both wished him a Merry Christmas. "Are you two okay?" He frowned up through the glass. "You look a bit peaky." "Hungover," Sirius grunted. "Jealous?" James replied. "Weirdo," said Remus. Afterwards, he took a nap, still worn out from the night before, and woke up in time for lunch, which, in Remus's opinion, was basically a perfect Christmas day. Boxing Day, 1976. Why is it called Boxing Day, anyway? Nobody knows, Remus yawned over his porridge. It's one of the great mysteries of life. Must be a Muggle thing. I'll ask my Muggle Studies professor. "You do Muggle studies?" The Slytherin Flint was staring down the table at him. Sirius threw 2 fingers up at him, then turned his back, ignoring him. Remus kept eating, the brown sugar melting on his tongue. Their knees were bumping under the table, and it was delightful. Suddenly, the owls arrived, screeching into the hall with an unusual urgency. There were more than usual as well. Remus realized that Dumbledore and McGonagall were not at breakfast. Tina, sitting opposite, got her post first and opened it. "It's from Mum." Her eyes widened, and she got up from the table at once, hurrying away out of the hall. Flint did the same. Then Arnold. "What's going on?" Remus asked, as Flitwick sighed heavily, shaking his head. He passed the 2 remaining boys a copy of the Daily Prophet. They leaned in together to read it. "Muggles attacked in Christmas crisis," blared the headline. Last night, while thousands slept safely in their beds on Christmas night, over 100 Muggles all over Britain were attacked in their homes. The Aura's office confirmed this morning that the attacks were magical in nature and intended to cause harm. The attacks took place in a number of locations, apparently targeting families with ties to the wizarding world, those with magical relatives or a history of Muggle magical relations. Offences range from minor jinxes to, in some cases, the use of unforgivable curses. There are no suspects at present. The Minister for Magic is expected to make a statement later today. Professor McGonagall arrived while they were reading, with Flint, Tina and Arnold in tow. Tina looked as though she had been crying. Flint was scowling miserably. "You've all heard the news," the professor said, her voice thinner than usual, strained and tired. "If your parents have requested that you return home, then we will make arrangements at once to ensure you arrive safely." "Is there anything we can do, Professor?" Sirius stood up, frowning. Flint rolled his eyes. "No, Mr. Black, thank you. Simply stay calm and carry on as normal." "Please, Professor Flitwick," Tina sobbed. "I need to go home now. It's my auntie." Arnold put his arm around her shoulder and whispered something comforting. "Come on, Moony," Sirius murmured. "Let's see if James knows anything." "I don't know anything," James said, almost as soon as he opened the mirror to respond to their calling. "Dad's gone to the ministry with Moody. They let me read the paper, but there's nothing else. Everyone knows who did it, though. Death Eaters." Sirius nodded gravely. "Voldemort?" Remus asked. "Does he have that many followers? Over 100, the paper said, all over the country in one night?" "Must be more than anyone thought," James said. "Well," Sirius sat up, his mouth a grim line, "my family alone would account for at least 20. "They're not your family," James said fiercely. He and Sirius stared each other out for a while, and Remus shifted away slightly, feeling intrusive. Sirius's temper was rising. Remus didn't need enhanced senses to work that out. "If Reg was one of them, I'll—" "Black," James hissed. "No one knows who any of them were. Calm down, okay? Moony, you there?" "Yeah." Remus shuffled back into the mirror's view. James looked at him. "Don't let him be a twat about this, right?" "What do you want me to do?" Remus asked, nonplussed. Sirius's family crises were usually James's job. Remus's role was different. Just distract him. Remus personally didn't think that sounded like the best idea. It wouldn't get rid of the problem, and James almost definitely wouldn't approve of Remus's distraction techniques. Sirius talked to James for a bit longer, and Remus left them to it. He thought longingly about the final joint, sitting in his bedside table upstairs. Probably not appropriate. Thursday, the 27th of December, 1976. Arnold, Tina and Flint went home on Boxing Day, so after that it was just the 2 of them, and the teachers, of course, but they seemed to be in a never-ending conference, McGonagall's face growing more and more weary every time Remus saw her. Sirius sulked. He didn't want to go out, he didn't want to stay in, he didn't want to smoke or drink or eat or play games. He just wanted to stew. Remus would have been quite content to let him, if only it didn't affect the entire atmosphere of the castle so much. He tried James's distraction idea. "Want to play that game?" "Nah, I'm rubbish at it." "Yeah, but I'm not." "You play it then." He hunched down into his chair, arms folded. Remus sighed. "Want to go out on your broom? I'll go with you and everything." "Don't have my broom here." We can borrow them from the shed. Hooch won't mind. Nah, don't like using other people's brooms. Snob. No response. Chess? Boring. Homework. That was just met with a dark look. Oh, want a blowjob? Bloody hell, Mooney. What? I'm running out of options. Jesus, just trying to cheer you up. I don't want to cheer up. Yes, that much is clear. He fiddled with a loose thread on his sleeve. Do you want to go to the Potters? Sirius looked up. What? I don't mind, Remus said honestly. If you need to see them, if you need James. For a moment, Remus wasn't sure what Sirius was going to, too. He seemed to consider the idea, and Remus wished he hadn't suggested it, but he shook his head. Nah, he said, what sort of mate would I be if I left you here by yourself? That got Remus's back up. He tugged at the thread on his sleeve, breaking it. Well, you're not being much of a mate right now, to be honest. I know you're in a mood, but I'm not in a mood. Sirius spat angrily. I'm pissed off. Look, you don't know what it's like, having family out there doing Merlin knows what. People I'm actually related to, Mooney. Oh, God, change the bloody record, will you? Remus groaned, getting up to prod the fire. Sorry, James, he thought, I'm not you. Poor Sirius Black, the spoilt rich boy with the wicked family. Oi, watch it. Well, I'm sorry, but we've had 6 years of this now. No, I don't know what it's like because I don't have a family, let alone an evil one. You know what I've got? A pack of bloody werewolves waiting for me to come of age so I can finally go and join all the other monsters. Mooney, I've got some brutal fucking mass-murdering child killer out there waiting for me. And not much else, to be honest. I don't have the Potters or an uncle. I don't even have a flipping future. So, if you don't mind, I'd rather not sit around here listening you whinge about how hard you've got it. He'd only decided halfway through speaking that he was going to storm out, but he hoped it didn't look that way. He hadn't let himself get that angry in a very long time, and, as ever, it had been Sirius who'd brought it out. He went to the library because there was nowhere else, and because Sirius would almost definitely look there first. It was weird, walking through the empty halls and staircases. He could hear the portraits whispering as he passed, and didn't like it. When he got to the library, he realized that he didn't have a next step planned. He'd left all of his homework back in the dorm, so he couldn't check his notes. He could summon them, he supposed, but that somehow defeated the point of storming off. Remus just went to the nearest shelf and pulled out a random book, sitting in the most comfortable chair he could find with it. It was on potions. Just his luck. For the first time in a few years, Remus used Latiuncula Magna to read. It was easier, and his head was too much of a mess to concentrate very hard. Still, it calmed him down. Remus. He closed his eyes and breathed in before looking up. Sorry I shouted, Padfoot. Sorry I was whinging. Sirius shrugged. Well, it's okay to be angry sometimes. It's normal. Remus smiled, setting the book down. He got up and walked over to the library entrance, where Sirius stood, hands in his pockets, like a contrite child. I was a dickhead, though. I shouldn't have said those things. Ah, they were true. I'm a spoilt rich brat. Yeah, Remus grinned, ruffling his perfect hair. I don't mind, though. We can do one of those things you wanted to do now. If you still want. Which one? Chess? Oh, yeah, Sirius raised an eyebrow. Definitely chess. Friday the 28th of December, 1976. Do you want to talk about it? Sirius asked late in the afternoon. He had finally allowed Sirius to get on with his homework and was playing a game of solitaire with a deck of cards he'd found. Remus had never seen Sirius occupied in such a quiet activity before and kept sneaking glances. He looked up from his herbology, pretending he'd been completely absorbed in petal identification. Do you want to talk about it? Sirius repeated, still looking at his cards. The greyback stuff. Oh, that. Remus's throat went dry. No, I don't. Thanks, though. If you're sure, Sirius said, lifting a card and placing it on another pile. Just because you said that you didn't think he was after you, but then yesterday you said... Yeah, I know, Remus said, feeling his pulse speed up. I don't want to think about it right now, okay? Okay, then. Sirius looked up and smiled. Remus smiled back and felt such a surge of love for Sirius Black that it made him dizzy. Saturday, the 29th of December, 1976. Foul! Remus cheered gleefully as Peter's trainers sailed over the top of the goal line. Balls, Sirius sighed. Knew that was a bit ambitious. We should leave this up, Remus said, readjusting the hanging bedsheets. Imagine playing this with more people. Evans would make us take it down. Only after she'd had a go, I bet. You like her, don't you? Remus gave him a sharp look. Not this again. What? Sirius smirked, levitating an apple from the fruit bowl the elves had left out. You're obsessed with finding me a girlfriend. I'm not. I just don't want you to miss out on any of that stuff. Sirius got the apple through the largest hole and punched the air. Yes! 5 points. Remus returned, dryly. You're still 20 down. He cleared his throat. And I'm not missing out on anything. I know you don't think you are, Mooney, but I'm just saying... Well, don't. Don't be angry with me. I'm not. Remus fired an inkwell at the sheet so hard that he missed and splattered the white fabric with a bright blue splodge. You seem pretty angry. Sirius lowered his own wand, turning to Remus. Remus didn't look at him. I don't want a girlfriend. How many times? I know you say that, but I can't help but think there must be a reason behind it. I think I know why. Sirius shifted awkwardly, and Remus looked at him sideways, his heart pounding in his chest. He should have expected this eventually. It's because of the werewolf thing, isn't it? Sirius said. Remus opened his mouth, then closed it again. Really? Really? He sat down, head in his hands, and tried not to laugh. Sirius mistook this for something else, and said gently, You're worried about a girl finding out, right? But I mean, Evans knows, and she's fine about it, so I don't see why you wouldn't find someone else, and your scars aren't as bad as you think they are. Oh, really? Remus snorted. Yeah, Sirius nodded encouragingly. They're cool. And you, you're quite good-looking. You're tall and you're, Remus looked up at him curiously. Sirius Black was blushing. Jesus Christ, Remus thought, what have we got ourselves into? Sunday, the 30th of December, 1976. How far do you reckon Pete and Desdemona have gone? Ugh, why are you thinking about that? Remus wrinkled his nose in the dark. I dunno, Sirius replied. Can't sleep. Remus rolled onto his side and peered across the bedroom to where Sirius lay in his bed. He could clearly make out his pale outline. He was lying on his back, staring up at the canopy, arms behind his head. Not tired? Remus asked. They'd both been in his bed only an hour before. He felt the absence keenly, but there was nothing to be done about it. Suppose not. Keep thinking about tomorrow. Tomorrow. Last day of the year. Yep, it would be their last day alone too. Everyone was due back on the 1st of January, and the bubble they had lived in for the past 11 days would burst. Making resolutions? Remus asked, yawning. Not really, just the usual stuff. He sounded sad. Stuff I should stop doing. Well, Remus thought quickly, why don't you think about the stuff you want to do? Like what? Oh, I don't know. Remus stifled another yawn. Like how you're always talking about going to London. Muggle London. Properly, I mean, not just a dodgy squat in Mile End. Oh yeah, Sirius said, cheering up. We should do that in the summer. Can we go to Carnaby Street? Don't see why not. I want to learn to play guitar. Of course you do. And go camping. And see Bowie in concert. Remus smiled softly, listening to Sirius's dreams as he drifted to sleep. Monday, the 31st of December, 1976. Do you know any sewing spells? Remus asked thoughtfully, sipping a mug of tea from his favourite armchair and looking up at the bedsheets, which would have to come down today. Why would I know sewing spells? Sirius asked from the floor. He was sitting over a cauldron with a book beside him, trying to create his own fireworks to celebrate New Year's Eve. I was just thinking about the sheets. Pfft, Sirius waved a hand. They won't even notice. Ought to fix that crystal ball we broke too. Nah, and probably should look for those chess pieces that went missing. 2 days ago they had accidentally fired an entire set out of the window. They'd summoned most of the pieces back, but the Queen and 2 knights were still in the bushes somewhere below. "Look, everyone knew it was just going to be the 2 of us here for Christmas," Sirius replied, waving his wand carefully over the cauldron. It was their responsibility to lock up anything they didn't want to get shot out of the window. "And Peter's bed? It stopped making that weird noise now." "Yeah, but it still giggles when you sit on it." "He'll work out how to fix it, or get Desdemona to help him. You worry too much." Bang! The contents of the cauldron exploded in Sirius's face, knocking him backwards and filling the room with a plume of lime-green smoke. Remus ran for the window, coughing, trying not to laugh at Sirius's startled expression, face black with soot. "I told you we should just ask Flitwick." The dust settled, and now the whole room was covered with a fine green film. Remus raised an eyebrow. Sirius smirked. "Leave it to the house elves, I'm having a shower." He did go to Flitwick in the end, and the tiny charms professor was only too pleased to impart some advice on creating the perfect fireworks, without any messy potions or cauldrons. "He made me promise not to tell McGonagall that he taught me, though," Sirius laughed. "He's really gone up in my estimation, old Flitters." "Can't believe you went without me. I'm best at charms," Remus muttered as he climbed out of their bedroom window to sit on the ledge beside Sirius. "You were sleeping," Sirius nudged him jovially. "Still," Remus grumbled, folding his arms against the cold. Their legs dangled precariously over the edge, but he wasn't as afraid of heights as he had once been. Thank James's relentless broom training for that. He'd only taken a nap earlier to ensure he would be able to stay up until midnight, which was now only minutes away. It was very quiet outside, and other than the occasional animal noise rising from the forbidden forest or the soft hooting of the owls in the owlery, they might have been completely alone in the world. They were content to sit in this silence as the last moments of 1976 slipped away under a frozen winter sky. Remus felt a deep sense of satisfaction and contentment. It was bittersweet. He was looking forward to seeing James, Peter, and the girls again. He was looking forward to the spring term. But still, as soon as the Hogwarts Express pulled into the station the next afternoon, everything he and Sirius had shared over the past 12 nights would have to be tidied away and locked up until it was safe to resurface. Sirius raised his pocket watch, one he had received for his 17th birthday from the Potters. He held it up so that Remus could read it too. 5 seconds to go. Sirius smiled at him and squeezed his knee. "Ready?" He lifted his wand. Remus grinned back and nodded. "Ready." Chapter 104, 6th year, Bad Moon Rising. Tuesday, the 1st of January, 1977. "Here they come!" Sirius was practically bouncing next to Remus as they watched the horseless carriages approaching the castle gates. "Thank God," Remus joked. "Some intelligent conversation." "Oh, shut up, you love me, really." Sirius kicked him in the shin. "I do," Remus thought pitifully. "I really bloody do." But of course that was not what Sirius had meant. James disembarked from the mysteriously drawn carriages like a soldier returning from war. He and Sirius beamed at each other until Remus thought that the two of them ought to be snogging, not Sirius and Remus. Lily and Peter climbed out of the carriage behind, and Remus hugged her and nodded to him. "Good Christmas," Lily asked. "Thanks for the chocolates." "Thanks for the gloves," he replied, waving them at her to demonstrate. "Really warm." "Yeah, cheers for the gloves, Evans." James waved his own wool-covered hands. Lily blushed deeply and mumbled something about not wanting to leave anyone out. Earlier, Remus and Sirius had walked alone through a castle of empty halls, echoing and hushed with the whispers of the portraits and the eerie drifting ghosts. But as they all returned together, it was as if the school was transformed in an instant. The flagstones rattled with the busy chatter of friends reuniting, every arch and column filled with black-robed students. Remus felt he was awakening from a strange and quiet dream. It was incredible how quickly everything settled back to normal. Peter and Desdemona started a fight almost immediately. Lily hexed James halfway through dinner. Mary had tales of her newest boyfriend, which Marlene was rolling her eyes at. Sirius had eyes only for James, of course, but Remus was keenly aware of the looks he was getting from other quarters. All of the unanswered Christmas cards would be coming home to roost. "So what did you two get up to?" James asked, mouth full of roast beef. "You didn't give much away when we spoke." Sirius and Remus looked at each other only for the tiniest moment, long enough for Remus to note the spark of panic in Sirius and grin at James. Spent most of it trying to keep Padfoot out of trouble, obviously. James and Peter laughed, and that was all anyone needed. Sirius settled back, shoulders lowering, and Remus watched him from underneath his eyelashes. This wasn't going to work. It was all too impossible. The night before, just before he drifted to sleep, Remus had made a decision. He had to talk to Sirius. The irony was not lost on him, that after days and days of nothing but talking, the solution seemed to be more talking, but this time he would make Sirius listen. He only needed an opportunity, which he accepted would not be easy. Opportunity and just a bit more time. He wasn't brave enough just yet. Just now, every song he heard reminded him of Sirius, every soppy sentence in every novel. Maybe he wasn't quite ready to give it all up. Sirius certainly wasn't. Remus had tried questioning him after everyone had been back for a few days, and Sirius had accepted an invitation to Hogsmeade from Emmeline Vance. "Don't you think we ought to stop? Isn't it a bit confusing for you?" "Why would it be confusing? It's not the same thing." Sirius raised his eyebrows in genuine surprise. "Oh," Remus said quietly. He was glad they were in a cupboard and it was dark. "Oh, isn't it? Well, no, she's a girl, you're Moony." "What does that mean?" "It just means, you and me, we're not, and she, oh, for goodness sake." He got irritated and gave up explaining. "I just can't see any reason to stop, okay? It's fun, isn't it?" "Yeah," Remus sighed. "Look, if someone asked you out, that would be fine, obviously." "Right," Remus nodded. "That's nice of you. Oh, come on, don't be like that." Sirius started kissing his neck, and Remus was in no position to argue after that. He'd had plenty of opportunities, really. He was as weak as Sirius when all was said and done. Besides, it was just a secret, as Sirius had once said, long before everything got complicated. You're not Moony if you don't have a secret. He could do secrets. Except it was getting harder, especially around the full moon, when his nerves were thinnest and every emotion burned just beneath the surface. Then he would see Sirius with some girl or another, watch as she picked fluff from his school jumper, or straighten his tie, or wrap her arms around his waist, and he would want to tear her to pieces. Sometimes he thought it must be so obvious. Surely everyone could tell. Surely James could tell. Remus would be sitting with them, or walking beside them, or eating breakfast, and his eyes would catch Sirius's, and how could no one else feel it? It made him feel guilty. Remus wondered if he was lying to Sirius even more than Sirius was lying to himself. Remus was being dishonest about what he wanted, about how much everything meant to him, and in the end he could see that he was confusing Sirius even more. The best thing was to lay everything out, then deal with the consequences. Not yet, though, maybe after the full moon. Thursday, the 6th of January, 1977. Remus woke up outside. This was very wrong. The sky above was blue and cracked with clouds. There were trees, black crooked branches. The breeze was cool on his skin and the leaf litter soft and mulchy beneath him. Not right, but more pleasant than usual. He blinked against the morning light and looked around to see his three friends watching him cautiously. Sirius pulled off his cloak quickly and handed it to Remus. "Here, it's chilly." "What happened? Why aren't we back in the shack?" Remus frowned, pulling the cloak around himself. He noticed that James was panting hard and holding his arm in a strange way. "Did I hurt you, Prongs?" "Not on purpose." James shook his head, obviously keen to keep Remus calm. You kept trying to get away from us, that's all. We couldn't get you to follow us like normal, not even Padfoot." "I remember." Remus frowned and climbed to his feet. "Were we hunting?" "You were," Sirius said, looking at him oddly. "There was something you really wanted to get at. In Hogsmeade." "In Hogsmeade?" It all came flooding back like a bad dream. That scent. He'd smelled it first on Christmas Eve in the Hog's Head, and even then he had known what it was. How could he be so stupid? "You're sure you're not hurt?" Remus asked again, looking at James. James nodded fervently, his messy hair bobbing in the morning breeze. "Come on," he jerked his head. "We've got to get you back to the shack before Madame Pumphrey gets there." He followed them, treading gingerly over the stony forest floor in bare feet. "We're not too far," Sirius said, walking slowly beside him. "We managed to sort of shepherd you in the right direction, but you kept trying to give us the slip." "You all have to go back to the castle," Remus said, unable to meet their eyes. I think something might have happened last night." "Nothing happened, Mooney," Peter said. "We didn't lose sight of you once, honestly." "That's good," Remus nodded. The shack was in sight now, but you still ought to go, trust me. Thankfully they did, all still shaken by whatever had taken place just before Remus returned to his human body. Remus entered the shack, dressed and sat quietly on the bed to wait for Madame Pumphrey. She did not come. Instead, it was McGonagall who opened the trapdoor, almost an hour after daybreak. "Mr. Lupin," she said in the usual brisk manner she used when a detention was forthcoming. "Where's Madame Pumphrey?" he asked, feeling very cold all of a sudden. "She's on other business this morning, in Hogsmeade," the professor said, her face lined with concern. "She asked me to attend you. Are you injured?" "No, I'm fine. What happened in Hogsmeade?" "Come along, Lupin," his teacher said, turning quickly back into the tunnel. "If you're quite well, then we should be getting back to the castle as quickly as possible." "Please," he had to walk quickly to keep up with her, which wasn't easy when your bones were still settling back into their usual positions. "Please, Professor, what happened in Hogsmeade?" "I'm afraid I can't. It was a werewolf, wasn't it? An attack?" "Remus!" She turned and looked at him. They were eye level these days, and he was still growing. "How do you know?" she asked sharply. "I could smell it, the other one. I knew they were nearby. It wasn't me, I swear." "No, we would know if you had escaped." She seemed very sure about that, so he didn't object. "Was it bad?" "Yeah." "Someone's dead?" "I'm afraid so. Now, I really can't talk about it, so let's just get you back to the castle, all right? I know that Poppy usually keeps you in the infirmary for a day or so to rest, but do you think you could go to your lessons as usual today? I think it might be best to avoid any suspicion." "Of course." "You can come to me if you feel unwell at any point." "I'll be fine." His voice was low and empty. He had never met another one. Now he knew there was one close by. "Remus," McGonagall said, giving him a severe look, "this was not your fault. This was nobody's fault. Do you understand?" "Yes, Professor." It was better just to tell adults what they wanted to hear most of the time. Perhaps he could write to Ferox or even Moody. Remus desperately wanted to talk to Sirius about it privately, but he supposed he might have to wait a little while. He knew it all now. There had been another wolf in Hogsmeade over Christmas, and it had been waiting for the full moon. They had to be on Voldemort's side, on Greyback's side, because, in Remus's opinion at least, you'd have to be mad or evil or both to place yourself near other people during a full moon. Ought he to have told somebody that he'd recognized the smell on Christmas Eve? Could he have saved a life? He hadn't been sure, and he hadn't wanted to get in trouble for sneaking out. The breakfast hall was buzzing with the news. Owls were flying back and forth. Lily sat deliberately next to Remus and squeezed his hand under the table. He squeezed back gratefully and thought how easy it would be to fall in love with her if he was that type of man. "It's horrible," Marlene said tearfully, reading the paper over Mary's shoulder. "That poor woman, murdered in her bed." It had been a young couple who had moved to Hogsmeade in November, both magical, but she was Muggle-born. She was dead, her husband bitten and apparently at St. Mungo's. Their wedding photo graced the front page of the Prophet and made Remus sick to look at. "Is it still on the loose?" Remus asked, keeping the hand which was not holding Lily's flat on the table so nobody could see him trembling. "Looks like," Mary confirmed, still engrossed in the article. "No one could catch it. Tonight's not a full moon, so we're all safe for at least another month, I suppose. That's the trouble with werewolves. If you don't catch them on the moon, then how are you supposed to catch them at all?" There must be a test or something, Marlene frowned. A revealing charm. Yeah, Mary replied thoughtfully. Maybe, but then you might end up finding the wrong one. Well, it sounds like they're all on you-know-whose side anyway, so I don't think it matters. Let's talk about something else, Lily said loudly. Yeah, James nodded. Defense against the dark arts next. Anyone had any luck with their Patronus yet? Only James had so far. Half an hour later, the class stood slack-jawed and watched James produce a spectacular silver stag which galloped ghostly around the room. The teacher applauded and invited everyone else to try, with varying levels of success. Lily managed a wisp of something, but it wasn't clear yet what it was. Peter had no luck at all and, to the surprise of nobody, Sirius cast something distinctly dog-shaped, but without the solid brightness of James's creation. Remus didn't so much as feel his wand flinch. He oughtn't to have been surprised. On a morning like that, it was impossible to pin down a happy thought for very long, besides which he was exhausted from the full moon. "You'll get it, Moony," Sirius encouraged, patting him awkwardly on the back as they left the classroom. "You always do." Remus nodded, wondering what Sirius's happy thought was. Remus had been using various memories of their Christmas together, though with poor results. "My mind's elsewhere, to be honest," he said quietly, so that only Sirius could hear him. "Of course," Sirius replied just as quietly. "That's to be expected." "I knew about it," Remus whispered quickly as the last few students left the room. Sirius stopped, staring at him with that awful look he'd had that morning. Remus grabbed his arm. "I mean, not exactly. I didn't know that would happen, but—" Sirius closed the door behind the last student and whispered a silencing spell. "But what?" "Remember when we went to the Hog's Head?" Remus said quickly, and still whispering because he couldn't seem to raise his voice. Sirius nodded. "I smelled something." "I thought you were just pissed." "Yeah," Remus nodded. "I think maybe I did too, or I thought it was, well, you, because I wanted—" He cleared his throat. "Anyway, it was definitely another one. A werewolf. I think it was female." "Not Greyback, then," Sirius said with a look of immense relief. "No," Remus said. "Well, thank Godric for that." Sirius grasped Remus's shoulder. His face turned to worry again just as quickly. "But Moony, if you could smell them, do you think that they could—" "I don't know. I think so." Okay, well, they didn't come after you, so everything will be fine." He was still holding Remus by the shoulder, keeping him in place, like an anchor. It was desperately needed, Remus thought. Every instinct in him said to run. Remus thought for a moment Sirius might kiss him, but they had another lesson to go to, and the Dada teacher had returned, knocking on his own classroom door in confusion. Sirius looked disappointed, or at least Remus thought so. It might have been wishful thinking, and gave a final squeeze before they parted. "Don't tell James," Remus said hurriedly as they unlocked the door. "Please don't tell anyone." "Okay, Moony," Sirius nodded slowly. "Anything you want." Chapter 105, 6th Year, Spilling Secrets. Friday the 14th of January, 1977. Remus tossed and turned under his bedsheets, unable to settle. His bed at Hogwarts, rated as one of the most comfortable he had ever slept in, a close second to the one he used at the Potters anyway. Rarely had he ever struggled to sleep in it, but the past few nights had been almost entirely sleepless. He couldn't stop thinking about the werewolf in Hogsmeade, about the poor dead woman, and the man who would wake up in St. Mungo's to find that his entire life had been destroyed. Remus had been afflicted for as long as he could remember. The thought of this man being forced to transform for the first time, probably alone, probably still grieving. It was unbearable. He felt a horrible, unmovable sense of guilt. So Remus did not sleep. He had been resorting to reading most of the night until he couldn't keep his eyes open any longer. Tonight he couldn't even concentrate on a book. He rolled onto his front to see if that would help. No, his face was all squashed in his pillow that way. He rolled on his side, but this made his hip hurt. The other side made his ear too hot. He groaned under his breath. "Oi, Moony," Sirius whispered as the curtains parted. "What's wrong?" He crawled inside silently, with a quick Loomis and a silencing spell. He knelt at the end of the bed, looking at Remus. "Sorry, did I wake you up?" Remus squinted at the unnecessary brightness. "Yeah, but it's okay." Sirius shifted and plonked himself down next to Remus. "Oh," Remus twisted his mouth, embarrassed. "Look, I'm not really in the mood for—" "Oh no, me neither. I mean, well, actually, now you mention it, but no, not why I came over." "Right. So, what's up?" "Can't sleep." "I can tell. Want a fag?" "Run out." "It's okay. I've got some off Emmeline. Come on, shall we go downstairs? It's late. No one will be there, and Prongs will give us shit if we smoke here." "Okay." Remus pretended to go reluctantly. Secretly, he was thrilled that Sirius was worried about him, and Sirius wanted to spend time alone with him without waking up James. The fact that the offered cigarettes came from Sirius's current girlfriend was a fact Remus was willing to overlook for now. Downstairs, they settled by the window on the little love seat there. Both drew their knees up and sat facing each other, so that if Remus stretched just a little, their toes would touch. "So," Sirius sucked in, lighting a cigarette wordlessly, then passing it to Remus before lighting his own. It was probably something that impressed girls. It impressed Remus too, but he wasn't going to show it. "What's the plan?" "Plan?" Remus frowned. "You've been up all night for the past 3 nights and you haven't got a plan? Are you sure you're Mooney?" "I want to go back to the Hogshead," Remus said promptly. Sirius let his eyes flicker, but took this news in slowly. He exhaled smoke, looking out of the dark window at the waning moon above them before returning to Remus to speak. "Right, okay, I think I can understand why." He took a hard drag on his cigarette. "Invisible?" "No." Remus shook his head, taking short, nervous pulls on his fag. "No. If they're there, if she's there, then I want to meet her." "Remus, no." "Why not?" Remus shot back hotly. He was ready for a fight if Sirius wanted one. That would feel good. That would be something. "Because it's dangerous? Because you've never met them before and you don't know what they're like except that they murdered a woman the other night? Because you're not even 17 yet, and if you have to defend yourself with magic, you could get kicked out of school?" Sirius was staring at him as he said all of this, incredulous. Remus blinked in shock. He stubbed out his cigarette and stood up, using his height against Sirius. "You can't tell me what to do, just don't get in my way." "Don't be like that. Look, I understand how you feel." "Ha! Okay, I don't understand." Sirius shook his head impatiently. "But I want you to be safe." "I will be. It's ages until the next full moon. She won't have any advantage over me." "Don't you think this is exactly what Greyback wants?" "What are you saying?" Remus growled. "That I'm being stupid?" "No, not stupid, just reckless." Sirius Black lecturing me on recklessness? Very bloody funny, that. "Oi," Sirius stood up now, angry. "Yes, here we go," something in Remus said. "Go on, try it." "Well, it's pretty rich of you to tell me not to put myself in danger." Remus continued, knowing he was being cruel. "You weren't so concerned about my safety this time last year." Sirius's face fell. He looked down at the carpet, and Remus saw what he had done. That's not fair, Mooney," Sirius said quietly. "Life's not fair," Remus wanted to say, but he knew how childish and petulant that would sound. This wasn't an argument either of them was going to win, and he was tired, so exhausted from worrying and thinking and imagining and not sleeping. "I have to meet them," he said finally. "I think I'll go mad otherwise. I think I'm already going mad." "Okay." Sirius recovered and ran his hand through his hair. "Okay, what about Ferox? Have you tried talking to him?" "Thought about it. He'll try to stop me. Moody, too. It's their idea not to let me go to Hogsmeade in the first place." All right, we'll go, okay, together. We'll tell James and—" "I don't want anyone else to know," Remus said fiercely. "It's private." "Merlin, Mooney, you're not making this easy." "It's not easy. It's fucking difficult, okay, but I have to do it." "Okay," Sirius raised both hands in a peacemaking gesture. "We're fighting," Remus thought. "We're fighting and he's the one trying to calm me down." That made him feel a bit dizzy, and he sat down on the nearest sofa. He leaned forward, head in his hands. "I'm sorry," he said in a small voice. "I know it's just also—" "I do understand, Mooney." Sirius sat next to him. "I'm trying to help." "You can't help," Remus said. "I have to do this on my own. I can't risk anyone else. It has to be me. I have to—" Remus began talking, and it all came out in a jumble of sleep-deprived babble. "If I can meet her, then maybe I have to meet Greyback one day. I just know I have to, and I want to, not to join him or anything like that, just to know him and to understand why he did what he did and why he made me who I am." Tears had sprung out of nowhere, and he covered his face, ashamed. Sirius was quiet beside him. "Mooney." He laid a cool, tentative hand on Remus's shoulder, lightly, as if Remus might spin around and snap at him like a wild animal. "He didn't make you who you are. He made me what I am." Oh God, he was sobbing now. He wished he hadn't started this whole conversation, wished he'd just sent Sirius back to bed. The last time he'd cried had been a similar situation. He had been sitting next to a boy he loved, saying something which hurt to say. Grant had held him and made him feel like everything would be all right. Remus knew he had no right to expect the same from Sirius. As Remus's shoulders began to shake with emotion, Sirius moved slightly, but he didn't go anywhere. Remus heard him give a strange little noise, which might have been sympathetic or just confused, but he shifted closer and slid his hand down into Remus's and squeezed his fingers. Pathetically, Remus squeezed back as he wept angrily about Greyback and the poor murdered woman and the dreadful unfairness of everything. Saturday the 15th of January 1977. Remus woke up at dawn, still curled up on the couch, covered in a woolen blanket from the dresser kept in the corner of the common room. He frowned against the sunlight, blinking and confused while he slowly remembered where he was. Sirius was still there at the other end, sitting up with his head lolling back in sleep, mouth open. Of course, Sirius didn't snore. Remus wished he could watch him for a bit longer in the dim early light, but he had been scrunched up all night and desperately needed to stretch. He moved carefully, his stiff limbs creaking like the branches of an ancient yew. Sirius stirred, coughed lightly, and opened his eyes. "Morning," he grunted, straightening up. "What time is it?" "Nearly 7, Remus replied after a quick glance at the grandfather clock. "James will be up for Quidditch in a minute." "Yeah. You okay?" Remus set his bare feet down on the carpet and rubbed the pins and needles out of his left leg. "I slept, at least," he replied. "Sorry for last night." "Pff!" Sirius waved his hand, yawning. "It was nothing. I've had much worse meltdowns." "What are you two tossers doing down here at this hour?" James came bounding down the stairs, broom in hand. He looked at them both, took in their pajamas and Remus's blanket. "Did you sleep here?" "Had to," Sirius replied, stretching. "Anything to get away from your snoring." James grinned, shaking his head. "Weirdos. Don't fancy joining me for a quick go around the pitch before practice, Padfoot?" "Nah!" Sirius yawned again. "I'm going back to bed. It's Saturday, Potter, you lunatic." "It's Hogsmeade later. Don't oversleep." James warned. "Sorry, Mooney." He gave an apologetic glance. "It's okay," Remus replied. "You lot go and have fun. I've got homework, obviously. The common room will be nice and quiet." "See you both for breakfast, then?" James asked, halfway out of the room already, eager to be the first on the pitch. The common room would start filling up soon, the Gryffindor Quidditch team first, then some of the keener students looking to get their homework out of the way before the trip into the village, scheduled for later. Remus looked at Sirius. "Are you really going back to bed?" Sirius raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, want to come?" For the first time in days, Remus laughed. "Hi, Remus, can I sit here?" Remus looked up with a small frown that had more to do with a complex astronomy chart than being interrupted. He smiled as soon as he saw who it was, and nodded. "Of course, Chris, take your pick." He motioned to the 5 empty chairs at the table he was using. Christopher sat just 1 seat away from Remus. "Didn't fancy Hogsmeade?" "Oh, well, I knew you couldn't go, and I'm behind on a few things, so—" Christopher looked slightly nervous. He sat with his notebooks and parchment clutched in his lap, eyeing Remus shiftily. Did you want to get your work out?" Remus prompted, vaguely amused. "Yeah, sorry. Christopher quickly started spreading out his notes, awkwardly, blushing fiercely. You okay, Chris? Yep. Okay, well, I'm doing astronomy and making a proper mess of it. You're quite good at stars and stuff, aren't you? Yeah, I mean, not brilliant, but okay, yeah, want me to look? Thanks. Remus slid over his chart. Oh, right, I can see where you've gone wrong. You're a few degrees out. Christopher pulled out his compass and began plotting a new trajectory for Venus. Remus was quite happy to let him get on with it and started flicking through his planner. He had history to do, but had perversely planned to save it for last as a treat. He could probably tell Christopher that to lighten the mood. It was the sort of thing Chris did too. Sirius would only shake his head in bafflement and call him a swot. He was just about to say something when Christopher beat him to it. I started reading some Muggle books, he said in a rush, as if he had been building up to it for a while. Over Christmas. Did you? Remus smiled politely. He'd been telling Christopher for ages that he was limiting himself by not reading books by non-magical authors. How'd you get on? Yeah, it's been great. I like poetry best. It was a fairly innocuous statement, but Christopher looked as though he was spilling his very darkest secret. His cheeks were crimson now, and he wasn't looking at Remus when he spoke. I like Oscar Wilde a lot. Oh? Remus replied steadily, wondering where this was going. He thought he had a pretty good idea what Christopher was getting at, actually, but he needed to stall for time while he worked out how to react. Surely they weren't going to talk about this here and now, at 3 o'clock on a Saturday in an only half-empty common room. There were first years playing gobstones on the carpet, for goodness sake. Yes, and Christopher Isherwood, Chris continued valiantly. It was brave, Remus decided. It was maybe the bravest thing he had ever witnessed. Right, yeah. He cleared his throat, wishing he knew the right way to respond. You might like Truman Capote, too. Christopher looked at him, half eager, half afraid. They're your sort of writers too, then? Christopher was gnawing his lip very hard now. Remus was worried he would bit through the skin. Yeah. He didn't know how he felt about it, really. He'd had an inkling, more than an inkling, about Christopher for quite some time, but he hadn't expected this in a million years. Christopher looked incredibly relieved and leaned in. How long have you known? He whispered. Remus leaned back, panicking over who might be listening. He glanced around quickly, then rubbed the back of his head. Christ, he breathed. I really need a cigarette. Want to go for a walk? This was perhaps the worst possible time to talk about this, but that wasn't Christopher's fault. Christopher didn't know about the werewolf situation, or Greyback, or Sirius's nonsensical attitude to sexuality, or even that the Marauders were planning to go to war in just a year's time. Christopher only knew one thing, and Remus knew that he needed a friend. They went to the astronomy tower, knowing it was likely to be empty. All of the couples were in Hogsmeade today. They sat outside, backs against the parapet, and Remus smoked, and Christopher twisted his hands in his lap. How long have you known? He asked again. Since I was 15, Remus replied. Summer before last, you? I think I sort of always had an idea, but yeah, maybe only for a few months. It's going to be okay, you know, Remus said, hoping he sounded believable. It wasn't exactly a lie, but he didn't know for sure. Do the other Marauders know about you? Remus flinched, remembering the heat of Sirius's skin against him from earlier that morning, how he had held his hand as he cried, how he had left breakfast early to meet Emmeline. He shook his head. Nah, not yet. None of my friends know. You're the only person I've told. Remus didn't know what to say about that. Not everybody had a grant, he supposed. He half laughed, half sighed. Sorry, Chris. Wish I had some advice or something, but I'm just muddling through. That's okay. It's just good to know there's someone else. Is it like this with Muggles? Oh, well, I mean, there are queer Muggles, yeah. Obviously Oscar Wilde and that. They used to be able to send you to prison, but it's okay now. Well, not okay. It's not... I mean, it's still better not to be queer, I suppose. What about with wizards? Same, Christopher replied glumly. Better not to be. They were quiet for a bit. Remus started another cigarette. It was becoming a dreadful habit. He struggled to climb the stairs any more without wheezing. "Remus?" Christopher said. "Yeah? I'm glad that if there was anyone else who knew, then I'm glad it's you." God, Remus thought, why do you have to be so bloody sweet? All in all, it had been a very busy Saturday, and it wasn't over yet, Remus told himself as he lay in the dark, still as possible, waiting for his friend's breathing to level out, to tell him they were all asleep. He was keeping still and quiet to try and trick Sirius. He couldn't afford an interruption tonight. He had places to be. Yes, okay. He had told Sirius he wouldn't go to the Hog's Head, or at least that he wouldn't go without him. But Remus justified to himself this was too important, and he had to go alone. He couldn't be responsible for putting any more people in danger than he already had. And actually, he thought grumpily as he began to creep out of the room, James's cloak stuffed under his robes, who was Sirius to demand anything from Remus? Tossing each other off every now and then clearly didn't mean they had any special claim on each other. Sirius couldn't have everything his way. He covered himself with the invisibility cloak in the darkness of the stairway and then stole quietly through the half-empty common room and out of the portrait hole. He had the map and he had his wand and nothing else. Sooner than he had expected, Remus found himself already outside the statue of the humpbacked witch, and then he was in the tunnel, walking at a speed he rarely managed. He didn't need to light his wand, as he usually did when the others were with him. He just ploughed on through the cold air. The smell of chocolate was getting stronger by the minute, and it had never been less appetizing. In Honeydukes he was able to get through to the front of the shop with little trouble, though he had a hairpin he'd pinched off Mary just in case. And all of a sudden he was there, standing alone in Hogsmeade. He kept going. It was the only option. He could smell her already. She was still there, or had been recently. Remus's heart began to pound. He was more frightened than he ever had been in his life, more frightened than he had been last year, waking up to find out what Sirius had done. Outside the Hog's Head, he finally stopped for breath. The scent was very strong now. Light glowed through the dirty pub windows, and Remus could see that it was not busy inside, though there were customers. He pulled back the cloak, breathing in the chill January air. There was movement behind him, a noise like a gasp of delight. There you are. Who's a pretty boy then? Chapter 106, 6th year, The Long Night. She was not what he had expected. Well, he had not known what to expect, but it was certainly not this. She was small-bodied, but had the bearing of someone much taller. Her sharp, angular features were made more severe by her shaved head and huge, fog-grey eyes, which focused on him with a predator's glint. She had a wide mouth, and her lip had been split at some point and healed badly. She had scars too, as many as he did, but almost invisible under a complex lacework of small circular tattoos spiralling across her weather-beaten skin in untraceable sequences. "Remus Lupin," she said in a low, gravelly voice. She had a horrible, menacing smile. She showed all of her teeth, which were in bad condition, discoloured and uneven. "I've been waiting for you, my dear." He pulled out his wand at once, adopting a duelling stance. "Drop that!" she snarled, raising a hand. Her nails were long, yellow and clawed, filthy with dirt. His wand clattered to the ground, and he gasped. Remus was frozen to the spot. She stood only meters away, and his wand was within reach, but he couldn't move a muscle. She laughed, her breath stark and white in the winter air. "I saw you here on Christmas Eve," she said. She pointed to the dark alley. "I saw you there, with the human. I followed you both." "What do you want?" he asked, steadily, staring her down. She was repulsive, unclean. Her cloak was heavy matted animal fur, crawling with lice and other vermin. She stank of the forest and rot and blood. Despite this, something drew him in, something familiar, safe and welcoming. "Pack," the wolf told him, a low growl from somewhere inside. "Pack." "We want you, brother," she said, stepping forward. She lowered her hand, and he felt a sort of unclicking in his muscles and stepped back automatically. We, he asked, finding courage now that he could move again. He snatched up his wand and she allowed it. We, us, she said, stepping forward again. She walked with one foot in front of the other like an animal. Her feet were bare on the cobbles, black with filth. Who's us? He asked, glancing back quickly. He was almost at the door. If he backed away far enough, he'd be visible from inside the pub windows. Your family, Remus Lupin. Oh, right? He asked, still distracted by his progress towards the pub. He had to get closer to people. Well, he tried, smiling. If we're family, I'd better buy you a drink. You reek of human terror, Remus Lupin, she said, tilting her head to one side. Sorry, he said with a shrug. Do you want a drink or not? If it pleases you. Great. He pushed open the door with some relief and stepped into the grimy pub. He had never really felt safe in the Hog's Head, but he had never been quite so glad to be surrounded by other wizards. Dark or not, there were maybe 5 or 6 of them, including the old white-bearded barman. A few patrons glanced up from under their hoods as the 2 werewolves entered, but if they had any clue about the situation, they made no sign of it. She sat at a table, not taking her eyes off Remus for a moment. He didn't order drinks, just sat opposite her. He placed both hands on the table, feeling that this was the safest option, hoping that she would see he was not planning to attack. So, you know my name. What's yours? He didn't know where this cavalier attitude had come from, whether it was a momentary madness or just the outcome of his own stupidity, but it was keeping him safe for now. Livia. We do not need other names. We belong to the pack. Right, okay. So, you were sent by the pack? I was sent by my father. Greyback. She did not reply. She just kept staring at him with her strange, violent eyes. She did not belong indoors, he felt. The train of her cloak was caked in mud, and dirt smeared the parts of her skin that were visible. Up close he could see that her tattoos were not simply circles, they were moon phases. Is Greyback really your father? Remus asked, keeping his voice low. He is our father, she said. Order or leave? The tall ancient barman appeared by their side. Remus looked up at him, wishing he knew how to transmit thoughts. Butterbeer, please. Livia did not say anything, and the barman did not question her, only snapped his fingers and the bottle appeared. He shuffled away, back behind his bar. Remus wiped the rim of the bottle cautiously and took a sip. It was much too sickly and not cold enough. Okay, he said to Livia again. You're in Greyback's pack. That, must be nice? Do you... I called for you, Remus Lupin, Livia interrupted, settling back in her chair. Remus was convinced that he had not yet seen her blink. I heard you calling for me. You sang so beautifully. You mean on the moon? I waited as long as I could, but the hunt was too good and I was hungry. Her eyes gleamed brightly, as if the memory was still very fresh. Why didn't you come to me? They did not lock you up. I followed your scent for days afterwards. I'm not a killer, he said. I don't hunt. She laughed. Madness! What have they done to you, my poor brother? Father told me you had suffered at the humans' hands, but I did not know how much. I don't suffer, Remus replied indignantly. I've been lucky. They take care of me. Poor boy, she said sadly. You do not know, but of course that is not your fault. How could they see anything but the shadows if they were never allowed to move their heads? Plato? Remus sat up, curious. Greyback lets you study Muggle philosophy? My father places no limitations on me. My father wishes me to be free and strong and wise. And a murderer. Wolves cannot murder. You know this, Remus Lupin. But we aren't wolves, are we? He whispered. Not all the time. We are what we are, she replied. She was enjoying this, he could tell. You can wear that uniform and wave your silly stick, but you know that you have more in common with me than anyone in that castle. She licked her lips. I have come to bring you home, Remus Lupin. Why now? The time is right, she cocked her head. Father prefers to wait until we are of age, so that we come to him with a true understanding of our place in the world, the place the human filth have forced on us. But time is short for us all these days. I'm not going with you, he said. I belong here. I'm a wizard." She laughed again, a throaty, deep laugh that rattled in her chest and spoke of long, cold winters in hard, unforgiving environments. "A wizard," she spat ruefully. "To think that a magnificent beast like you would aspire to be such a creature. You don't know half of the power you hold, Remus Lupin, nor does Dumbledore." "I'm still not going anywhere. Father suspected you would be difficult. He is very eager to meet you." That sent a chill down Remus's spine. She smiled again, reading him like a book. Remus swallowed dryly, ignoring the butterbeer now. "I'd like to meet him," he replied stiffly. "In time," she nodded, "once you have come to understand your place." "What's he like?" Remus barely breathed the question. Livia's eyes shone, and he had the impression that she could not see him. She was imagining something wonderful. "He is magnificent." "You think that—" Remus could hardly keep the emotion from his voice. "You call him your father after what he did to you?" "He elevated me," she hissed, her eyes focusing again, eyebrows knitting into a frown. "He gave me the greatest gift, and he gave it to you, Remus Lupin. Your father is calling you home." "And that's what you're here for, is it?" He looked her up and down. She gave a small shrug. "My father had hoped that I might be the right one to persuade you. I learnt on Christmas Eve that he was mistaken. We did not know that your desires lay elsewhere." She licked her lips again, her eyes raking over him. "This will not be a problem, I should let you know. The pack does not discriminate. You will find someone to your taste." "I'm not going anywhere," he repeated. "You can tell him that. And I want you gone before the next moon." "Don't flatter yourself, my dear brother." She arched an eyebrow. "I am here at my father's request. I came to speak with you and nothing more." "You murdered a woman." "Wolves cannot murder, Remus Lupin. I waited for you. When you did not come, I followed my nature. It is not easy, I know. Learning that the world is not as it seems is very painful. But you will learn, and you will come to us." She tapped out a rhythm on the beer-soaked table with her disgusting fingernails, and once again Remus found himself frozen in place. She smiled and ran a blackened talon across his arm slowly. It was hideous, vile, revolting, raising goosebumps in his flesh, but he couldn't get away. "They will trap you like this," she whispered. "They will cage you, shackle you, and tie you down until you are half mad with hunger. You will be beaten and betrayed. You will be alone and you will live in fear. This is a promise, Remus Lupin." His heart was hammering against his ribcage. He was giddy with terror, but still he could not move or speak or react. She dug her nails into his arm and he could not cry out, but tears of pain welled in his eyes as beads of dark blood bubbled up through his broken skin. "And you will come to us, crawling, defeated, and your father will welcome you with open arms and the love of the pack. You will never be lonely again." Crack! Someone apparated into the pub, catching Livia's attention. Remus couldn't turn his head to see, but she did, still gripping Remus's arm with all her strength, her face turned sour and angry. "Argentum Creo!" a gruff voice shouted, and Livia shrieked, letting go of Remus and covering her face as silver chains burst forth from the incantation, coiling themselves around her neck and arms. Groaning in pain, she hissed at Remus, "I will see you soon, brother," before apparating herself with a blistering crack. The silver chains fell to the sawdust-covered floor like a glistening snake, and Remus slumped forward, finally free. He turned away from his rescuer and threw up, his arm throbbing and the silver making his head swim. "Finite," the same gruff voice said, making the chains and the vomit disappear in an instant. "Sorry about that, Remus." Leo Ferox sat down in the seat opposite, where Livia had been only seconds before. Remus blinked at him through watering eyes and shook his head, wiping his mouth quickly. "'S okay," he croaked, feeling weak and shaken to the core. "Thanks." "Are you all right?" Ferox asked, his blue eyes filled with parental concern. "I think so. It's just the silver." Remus nodded, clutching his arm and taking a quick swig of butterbeer to clear the bitter taste in his mouth. "Yeah," he nodded again. "Good." Ferox's face turned stern. He reached across the table and slapped Remus around the back of the head. Remus yelped and ducked, more out of shock than pain. He stared at Ferox, wounded. His old teacher glared back at him. "Then you can tell me what the bloody hell you think you're doing?" She was... I know exactly what she was. We've been tracking her for weeks." "We?" "Me and Moody," Ferox said impatiently, as if this was not the point. "Didn't I tell you how dangerous Greyback was? Was I not clear?" "You were clear," Remus scowled. "But I can make my own choices." "Obviously," Ferox growled. The tall, white-bearded barman appeared at Ferox's shoulder with a tumbler of fire whiskey. Ferox accepted it and downed it in one. "Thanks, Aberforth." He nodded to the barman, who nodded and shuffled away again. Ferox shook his head, still angry. "You're lucky he saw you. You're lucky he knew enough to contact Moody before he contacted anyone else." "Why, who is he?" Remus turned to look. "It doesn't matter," Ferox snapped, drawing Remus's attention back. "But you're damned lucky." Okay, Remus looked at his hands. His arm had stopped bleeding, but it was stinging very unpleasantly. Who knew what kind of muck she'd had under her nails? "I'm sorry." "It's not good enough, Remus," Ferox sighed deeply. "You were stupid and careless, and you could have been killed. Do you know what they want? Do you know why she was waiting for you?" "Yes," he replied churlishly, folding his arms, careful not to bump the one that hurt. "She told me." Ferox huffed furiously. "They want to make you one of them." "I'm already one of them," Remus shouted, standing up so fast his stool flew backwards, clattering on the dirty pub floor and attracting everyone's attention. Remus didn't care. He started for the door. Ferox followed him outside. Remus walked faster, heading for Honeydukes. "You're not my dad. You're not even my teacher anymore, so piss off and leave me alone." His terror had turned to rage so quickly, his head still throbbing from the silver and from being slapped, just like bloody matron. Bloody adults are all the bloody same. His arm hurting and itching more than ever, and Remus was not quick on his feet at the best of times. Ferox caught up easily. He grabbed his shoulder. "Oi, look, maybe I was a bit harsh, but Jesus Christ, Lupin, you gave us all such a fright." Remus stopped at that. "All?" Ferox sighed again. "Come on, I'd better take you back to the castle. There are some people waiting for you." Before they began to walk back, Ferox cast a Patronus, a huge, long-legged bird, to send a message up to Hogwarts that they were both safe. "Dumbledore knows, then," Remus sighed. "'Fraid so. And McGonagall, I suppose?" "You're looking at a lot of detention, Remus. I won't lie to you." Remus snorted and looked up at Ferox properly for the first time. Actually, he didn't have to look up. In the 2 years since they had last met, Remus had caught up in height. They were eye to eye. Ferox was still golden-haired, ruggedly handsome and weather-beaten, but he was no longer the hero Remus had worshipped at 13. He was just a man, a soldier in a war, like all of them. "I'm really sorry," Remus said. "I knew it was stupid. I can't even explain myself." "Ah, you don't have to, lad." Ferox clapped a hand to his shoulder. "It's only natural, knowing what you know about him." "I've never met another werewolf before," he said. "Are they all like that?" Ferox glanced at him sideways. "What do you think?" Remus thought about this while they walked, and eventually shook his head. "No, I suppose they can't be." He sighed. "There are good and bad people, good and bad wizards. Why should monsters be any different?" "Remus, me old pal, if you could get everyone else to understand that, then I don't think there would be a war on." He was brought straight to Dumbledore's office. Remus had never been inside it before, and it was almost as anxiety-inducing as meeting Livia. It was a high-ceilinged, airy room with portraits covering the walls and cabinets full of strange curiosities. Terrifyingly, Dumbledore was alone, sitting at his desk, writing on a long piece of parchment. Remus stood in silence for at least 5 minutes. "Mr. Lupin," the headmaster said finally, "we seem always to meet under the most unpleasant conditions." "Yeah, fair enough," Remus nodded. He'd had too much of a night to care much about what Dumbledore had to say. I said I'd fight for your bloody cause, old man. What more do you want? Dumbledore watched his nonchalance carefully. You have done a very dangerous thing tonight. Yeah, he raised his bandaged arm. You know that is not what I am referring to. I know, Remus replied, hanging his head, trying to look remorseful. If he hadn't had the chance to cool off with Ferox, then he might have a lot more to say. I know, Professor, you aren't referring to any bodily harm I might have come to. That is clearly the least of your concerns, considering I had been tearing myself apart for 8 years before anyone decided to intervene. Dumbledore, of course, didn't know about the Marauders' secret. He may well have known about Madame Pomfrey's efforts to help Remus, but if he did, he showed no interest. So Remus shut up and took his punishment, hoping that eventually Dumbledore would release him and he could just go back to bed. There was a lecture on responsibility and maturity, a stern reminder that the war is bigger than him and that his own personal motives did not matter. We all have to make sacrifices. Yeah, Remus scoffed inwardly, some more than others, presumably. Do you understand, Remus? Yes, Headmaster. After that, he had to give Dumbledore a detailed account of everything he and Livia had discussed. It wasn't much. Remus couldn't help feeling a little bit disappointed by how little he had learned himself. Dumbledore seemed pleased, however, as much as Dumbledore ever seemed to be one thing or another. Several of the clocks in one of the glass cabinets began to chime, and Remus realized that it was 3 o'clock in the morning. He stifled a yawn. Yes, Dumbledore nodded, as if Remus had just made a very interesting point. Perhaps that is enough for tonight. You may go to bed, Mr. Lupin. Remus nodded dozily and stood up, rubbing his hip, which was stiff from sitting on hard wooden seats all evening. Professor? He asked just before leaving. Dumbledore had returned to his letter-writing and made no sign he had heard the boy, so Remus just continued anyway. Livia said that I didn't know half the power I had, and she could do wandless magic and wordless magic, and... Her talents were nothing out of the ordinary, Mr. Lupin, Dumbledore replied, not looking up. She has clearly studied the dark arts, and may be particularly gifted. Do not dwell on it. Okay, then, Remus replied, even more disappointed. Is Professor Ferox still here? Mr. Ferox is staying in Hogsmeade for a few more days. Good night, Remus. Good night, Headmaster. Professor McGonagall was waiting for him outside the office. She looked furious, but she didn't say anything. I'm sure you've had enough of a telling off for one night, she said stiffly. Oh, Remus sighed. I can take a bit more if it'll make you feel better. She raised an eyebrow at him, tutted but kept walking. When they arrived at the portrait hole, she stopped and said, 2 months' detention, every night except full moons, and tell those boys to get to bed at once. He crawled through to the common room and found James, Sirius and Peter there, waiting in their pyjamas. James was pacing by the fireplace, Peter was trying not to fall asleep, leaning on his elbow, and Sirius, who had been sitting bolt upright in an armchair, leapt to his feet the moment he saw Remus. "What do you think you're playing at?" he shouted, striding across the room. "Running off on your own." "Please don't, Padfoot. I'm knackered." Remus sighed, wincing. He was getting a headache. He just wanted to go to sleep. Enough talking tonight. "Do you have any idea what it was like finding out you'd sneaked off?" Sirius shouted. Remus raised an eyebrow at him. Sirius blinked and stepped back, slightly looking down. "For all of us, I mean." "I can imagine," Remus said, "and I'm sorry, but please can I just go to bed? You can have a go at me in the morning." "Yeah, back off, Black." James came over and placed a hand on Sirius's shoulder. Sirius shrugged it off, agitated. James sighed, taking his glasses off. "It's late, we're all tired. You sure you're okay, Moony?" "Fine." Remus nodded, so grateful to James Potter. Chapter 107, 6th Year, Negotiations. Sunday, the 15th of January, 1977. He slept as late as possible the next morning to put off further confrontation. He couldn't talk to them, not yet, not until his head was straight. They'd have so many questions, some he couldn't answer, some he didn't want to. He showered for longer than usual. Something of Livia seemed to cling to him, and he turned the tap right up, trying to scald it off. The claw marks she had left were healing already, but still itched under Remus's scratchy wool jumper. Washed and dressed, Remus went to his trunk and looked for a spare bit of parchment, before scrawling an untidy note. "If you're still in the village, I'd like to talk to you again." He folded it in a hurry, shoved it in his pocket, and headed for the owlery. The Marauders were all in the common room, in much the same state as they had been the night before. Remus looked at them, panicked, then bent his head and kept walking. "Moony, wait!" They followed him, all three, through the portrait hole. No matter, they couldn't discuss it in the open. He knew this, and they knew it. "I'm going to the owlery," he said, marching ahead. "Don't you want breakfast?" Peter asked. "After. Moony, can we talk about what happened last night?" James asked, sounding very tired still. Remus supposed he'd been bearing the brunt of Sirius's frustration. Good, let someone else do that for a bit. Not here. Unfortunately, they all followed him to the owlery, which happened to be completely empty, except for owls, of course, most of which were sleeping. "Who are you writing to?" Sirius asked at once. Remus closed his eyes, sighed, and resumed tying his note to the nearest owl. "Ferox, my old professor." "Why?" Remus dropped the string he was using and tutted as he had to bend to pick it up. He continued to explain calmly. "He's in Hogsmeade. I saw him last night, but I want to see him again." "What was he doing in—" Remus tutted again, fumbling with his third attempt to tie the note to the agitated owl's leg. Sirius was standing much too close, leaning over him, demanding answers, and Remus could barely concentrate. "He's working with Moody, and he got summoned there to bring me back." "Summoned by who?" "Fucking hell, give me a minute, will you?" Remus snapped. Sirius stood back, looking as if he'd very much like to say something else, but was biting his tongue. James touched his shoulder again. Remus ignored them both and tied the letter to the bird, maybe a bit too tight, because it pecked him angrily before flying off down towards the village. He could stay there, maybe. It might not take very long. But his stomach growled. He turned to look at his friends. "Okay, breakfast? Are you going to tell?" "Yes, Padfoot, fine. Let's, get some toast and go for a walk or something, okay?" So that's what they did. Remus buttered at least 5 slices of toast in the great hall, wrapped them in napkins, and stuffed them into the pockets of his robes. The other 3 Marauders followed him, watching cautiously as if they weren't quite sure what to make of him yet. "Right," he said once they were outside. "You all need to shut up and let me tell it to you, okay? No interruptions." They nodded solemnly as they walked. He saw Sirius purse his lips. Tough, Remus thought spitefully. You can listen to me for once. So he talked. He found it much easier than telling Dumbledore. At least he knew for sure that the Marauders were on his side. He tried to explain everything with as little emotional context as possible. He had known there was a werewolf nearby. He went to find them. He met Livia. Ferox intervened. "Moody talked to me last summer," he explained finally. "He said something to me, and it just made me think about how useful I can be, that's all. I have to stop looking at my furry little problem as a problem. If we're going to war with dark creatures, then as a dark creature I ought to be—" "You're not a dark creature," James said suddenly. "You're our Moony." Remus shrugged. He wouldn't have put money on James being the first to interrupt, but now he was pretty glad he had. He left a pause. There was nothing more to tell. James was still looking at him, with a small crease between his eyebrows. He pushed his glasses up his nose, clearly thinking very deeply. Peter, of course, looked anxious. He was staring at his feet, rubbing his hands together. Remus didn't look at Sirius. He looked for his fags instead. "So," James said after swallowing, "she's gone now, has she? The werewolf?" "Livia," Remus said, cigarette between his teeth. "Yeah, I think Ferox scared her off." "Too bloody right," James nodded, much more comfortable talking action. "And I bet with Moody on the case, she won't be back any time soon, eh? So, are you in a lot of trouble? With Dumbledore?" "I don't think so." Remus sighed. He rubbed his sore hip. "I think Dumbledore was more worried about me mucking up his spy ring rather than breaking any rules." "He wouldn't want to see you hurt. Any of us," James said sincerely. He eyed Remus's awkward posture. "Come on, there's a bench down here. You can finish your toast." They made slow progress down towards the edge of the lake, where there were a few stone benches. It was too cold for anyone else to be out at this time on a Sunday, and Remus watched the late morning mist drift across the dark surface of the water as he chewed on the remains of his crusts. Sirius hadn't spoken yet since the owlery, and Remus was trying not to notice it. Sirius felt betrayed. Remus knew that as sure as he knew his own name. Betrayed, even if he didn't really have a right to feel it. "This isn't about you." Remus wanted to hiss at doleful, silent Sirius. "Can't believe we all slept through the most exciting night of the year, eh?" James nudged Remus, trying to bring a bit of levity to the otherwise rather sombre atmosphere. "It wasn't that exciting," Remus grinned back, giving him what he wanted. "I was crap. If Ferox hadn't come, I dunno." "Do you think she could have disapparated with you?" Peter asked, still wringing his pudgy little hands. "I dunno," Remus replied. I think, I got the impression anyway, that she needed to me agree. Like it had to be me who made the decision. Otherwise, I suppose they could all just gang up and snatch me." "Well then," James said, slapping his thigh triumphantly, "there's no problem, is there? Well, I mean, there's no question." "No, of course not," Remus said quickly. "I'd never join Greyback." "Well then," James repeated, satisfied. Remus looked at his hands, still greasy from the toast. He wiped them on his trouser legs. Of course not. Of course he would never accept. "Mooney?" James said, sensing the odd quiet. "I'd never join him," Remus said carefully, "and Livia she was awful, but—" He breathed in. "Not everything she said was wrong." "What's that supposed to mean?" Sirius burst out. Remus still didn't look at him, growing hot. "Just that, well, wizards treat us unfairly, and you lot wouldn't understand." Sirius sprang up, as if he had been wound up to breaking point. He glared at Remus as if he was about to start screaming at him. Then he walked away at an impossible pace. "Black?" James stood up. "Oi, it's fine." Remus waved a hand. "Sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. I can't explain properly." "He's been such a moody git lately," James huffed, still watching the other boys storm away. "Go after him if you want," Remus said. "Honestly, you're the best at sorting him out when he's like that. Me and Wormy'll find you later, yeah?" "Okay," James said, already moving. "Thanks, Mooney." "Those two are so weird sometimes," Peter said, watching James catch up. "I swear I never know what anyone's on about anymore. It's all war this and war that." "Yeah, it's a bit of a pain in it," Remus replied. He had meant it sarcastically, but poor Peter had never been very quick on the uptake. "Yeah, you know what I mean, don't you, Mooney? I just think we're only 16. Can't we think about something other than doing the right thing all the time? We used to have fun." Remus was only half listening. He stretched, rubbing his hip again to see if it would move for him. "Think I might back to bed, Pete, or the library. Why don't you go and see Desi?" "What? You didn't know?" Peter stared at him incredulously as he helped Remus to his feet. "Know what?" Remus asked, arching his back again for good measure. "She dumped me." "Oh, shit." Remus blinked. "Sorry, mate. Was that last night too?" "Last week," Peter said with an uncharacteristic coldness in his voice. "Sorry," Remus said again, embarrassed. He didn't think he had actually spoken to Peter about anything much in weeks. He'd been so wrapped up in Sirius and the Wolf Pack and Sirius and Christopher, he resolved to do much better with all of his friends. After all, as soon as he turned 17, they would be all he had. "I'm really sorry, Wormtail," he said kindly. "Want to play chess instead, then?" Monday the 16th of January, 1977. Remus was genuinely sorry to hear about Peter and Desi. She'd never really been part of their group, but she was a nice enough girl and had made Peter happy. She had given him something that James and Sirius did not have, and that was special in itself. The breakup had ostensibly been simply down to a change in attitudes. They had been seeing each other since they were 14, and at 16 it seemed that Desdemona wished to spread her wings a bit. "She might change her mind," Remus suggested to a glum-faced Peter over their third chess game. Doubt it, Peter huffed. Reckon she's got a crush on that Roman Rotherhide bloke. Wanker. Knight to F3. I thought Mary was seeing him. Mary sees everyone, Peter sniggered meanly. She's like the girl version of Padfoot. Ferox's reply arrived later that Sunday evening. Remus, I'm afraid I can't invite you into Hogsmeade, but I can meet you for supper on Monday evening at the castle. I'll meet you outside the Great Hall at 6 p.m. That was okay. Good enough. He could ask what he needed to ask anywhere. Remus went to his lessons as usual on Monday and told the Marauders at lunchtime. Sirius was speaking to him again, but not properly. For every small step forward, he and Remus seemed to take 3 enormous steps back again. I'm having tea with Ferox tonight, he explained, so I won't see you until later. He knew James had Quidditch practice, which Peter would be watching now that he had no girlfriend. Sirius sat up straighter. Should we come too? Why? Remus asked, fixing him with a cold stare. Sirius shrugged and looked back at his soup. By the time 6 o'clock rolled around, Remus was practically pacing the halls. He didn't want to look over-eager, so he'd waited at the top of the landing before going down the main staircase at just 1 minute past the hour. This turned out to be something of a mistake. By the time he got there, Mary had found Ferox and struck up a conversation. Remus, she grinned as he descended. Look who's here. It's Mr. Lupin I'm here to see. Ferox smiled easily, shaking Remus's hand. It all felt very grown up. I'm trying to convince him to come back and teach us again, Mary explained cheerfully. We miss him, don't we, Remus? Yeah, of course, Remus nodded. Mary smiled at him and touched his forearm, leaning into him in a very familiar sort of way. He couldn't remember if she'd ever done that before. Can you wait here? She asked Ferox, still touching Remus. Marlene'll be down in a minute. She'd love to see you. I'm afraid we need to be getting on, Ferox said kindly. Maybe another time, Miss MacDonald. Remus, shall we? Remus followed Ferox up the staircase, rather than towards the hall, leaving Mary at the bottom. Thought we could do with a bit of privacy, Ferox murmured. Professor Kettleburn has kindly let me borrow my old office. Remus had only been in the Care of Magical Creatures office once since Ferox had left, to request an extension on an essay after a full moon. Kettleburn was a Spartan sort of man who had chosen not to decorate at all, but who had stacks of paperwork strewn all over the place. Ferox tidied this neatly away with a swish of his wand before summoning drinks and 2 plates for supper. The food appeared just as it did in the Great Hall, ham, egg and chips tonight. My favourite, Ferox smiled, motioning that Remus begin eating. They tucked in quietly for a few minutes, and Remus enjoyed the novelty of sharing dinner with a friend rather than hundreds of other people. So, he said, mopping up the last of his egg yolk with a chip, I wanted to talk about Livia. Look at you, Ferox nodded at him. 2 years ago I could barely get you to say 2 words to me about yourself. Remus shrugged. No time to be shy anymore, I suppose. There's a war on. Don't I bloody know it, Ferox sighed. All right, go on, lad. OK. Remus took a deep breath. I don't want to join them, greyback. I don't want to be a part of their pack or anything like that. Ferox nodded but said nothing. Remus, emboldened, continued, But I think I could find them easily. I think they could find me. And they still want me. That's what Dumbledore wants, isn't it? A back door to the werewolves. I can do that. I know what I did was stupid and I won't do it again, not while I'm at Hogwarts, not until I'm at least of age. But now I know her. Now I know what they're like. I'm not afraid. I can do it. I see. Has Dumbledore said, No, but I'm not stupid. Remus said dismissively. He hasn't asked me to do anything because he never asks. He just makes sure you know what he wants. But there are things I want too. And what are those? I'm not signing the register on my birthday, Remus said steadily. I'm not exposing myself to the ministry. I've looked into it. If I do, I have to report to them for 3 days every month. They'll lock me up. I assume it's not very clear from the information they put out. I can't keep a job like that. If Dumbledore needs a spy, then he needs me to be untraceable too. I see, Ferox said again, but I'm not finished, Remus snapped. Afterwards, if we win, I want amnesty for the werewolves, even Greyback's pack. Not Greyback, obviously, but his followers. Remus, that's completely— No, it isn't. Remus folded his arms. You don't know. Livia might be batshit, but she's not wrong. A choice between freedom under Greyback or imprisonment under the Ministry is an easy one to make. Ferox looked at him for a very long time. Remus drank his pumpkin juice, his throat very dry. His heart was beating so fast he thought that Ferox must be able to hear it. These aren't necessarily things Dumbledore can do, Ferox said slowly. Bullshit! Remus set down his goblet a little too hard on the desk. I can bring it to him. Ferox sighed, sounding defeated. But I can't make promises. Well, Remus replied coolly, I'm 17 in 2 months, so there's the deadline. Blimey. Ferox scratched his head. He sounded impressed rather than angry. You don't half remind me of Lyle right now. What happened to the hot-headed kid always getting into scrapes? I'm still hot-headed, Remus said simply. I think Lyle probably was too. It's not that I think Dumbledore can solve all my problems, but I wanted to lay all my cards on the table. Fair enough, Ferox nodded. All's fair in love and war, eh? I wouldn't know about that, Remus replied. Their plates vanished suddenly and then reappeared, bearing 2 big wedges of chocolate cake topped with fruit. They ate them quietly, both deep in thought, occasionally shooting looks at each other. How's it going with Moody? Remus asked casually. I suppose you probably can't tell me anything. You suppose right, Ferox nodded. Moody's well, though. Complete nutter, but glad he's on our side. And Achilles? Achilles is fine, Ferox smiled. Staying with a friend of mine. Speaking of which, how long's the romance been going on? Eh, Lupin? The what? Remus stared at him, wide-eyed. Ferox laughed. With Miss MacDonald down there? I'd have matched you better with Marlene, but I suppose the heart wants what it wants, eh? Oh, Remus relaxed. No, Mary's just a friend. Ferox said, obviously not quite believing him. What's brought on this personality switch, then? Why does it have to be about a girl? 2 years is a long time, Remus said, annoyed. It's not like I've suddenly changed. Look, I first said I'd help Dumbledore fight when I was 14, he tried to explain. And then last year, James Potter told us all that he planned to join as soon as he left school, and we all said we would too, and I was always going to, you know, but just because James and Sirius wanted to, I never had a reason myself, really. We're all going to suffer, if you know who wins, Ferox said. Yeah, I suppose. Remus nodded diplomatically. I know that, but I meant, well, I never really had much of a stake in it before. Now I've met Livia, I don't think anything's going to be that great for me after school finishes. No matter who's in power, I want a stake if I live. You shouldn't compare yourself to them, Remus. The pack. I can't really help it, can I? Everybody else will. You know my friend, Sirius Black? Not well, Ferox replied. The Potters took him in, didn't they? I thought it was a bit odd knowing his family. Exactly, Remus said triumphantly. Sirius is my best friend and a Gryffindor, and the Potters love him. But to everyone else, he's still a Black. He'll spend the rest of his life trying not to be, no matter how many good things he does. Because people never forget things like that. They think that what you are makes you who you are. It's the same for me. Remus was struggling now to keep explaining. Ferox looked completely lost. He sighed heavily. I'm sorry it has to go through you. You're the only person I know who has any weight with Dumbledore who I trust, who trusts me. Ferox watched him again, with a steady expression. I will try, Remus. You're asking a lot. Remus frowned. He thought about Livia, her bare feet, her ragged clothes, her terrible cough and the hollow look in her eyes. It was no way to live. He might be asking for a lot, but Remus had never asked for anything before in his life. He hoped Dumbledore remembered that. Chapter 108, 6th year, Mary, Mary. Mary, Mary, where you going to? Mary, Mary, can I go too? This one thing I will vow you. I'd rather die than to live without you. Mary, Mary, where you going to? Friday the 5th of February, 1977. The rest of January seemed to whiz by in a blur, and Remus just tried to get back to normal. The full moon landed early in the month, and Remus threatened to lock the Marauders out of the shack if they didn't promise to stay inside this time. Eventually, he knew he would weaken and allow them to begin letting him out again. But he felt that they ought to play it safe, at least for a while. The sudden distance between Remus and Sirius was painful and made all the more difficult by the fact that their relationship, such that it was, had been a secret all along. Remus resorted to his usual tactic, burying himself in his studies, while Sirius absorbed himself in Emmeline. He was sulking, Remus knew, and for once he didn't blame him. The whole messy situation only proved to Remus that they had to put a stop to it as soon as they could. It was becoming impossible to stay friends, and they needed to be friends before anything else. The problem was, Sirius hadn't come to him at all since that night they'd slept in the common room. Remus was terrified that this meant it was already over, that Sirius had come to the realization on his own and simply chosen to stop, and Remus would not allow that. It couldn't just be finished without either of them saying anything about it. "Surely? You held my hand," he wanted to say. "You saw me cry." The day after the February full moon, Remus lay in his usual hospital bed, pondering these things. He had a cut on his arm, which Madame Pumphrey had told him to practice his healing charms on. It was very basic, but he was so tired after his transformation. "You have to try, dear," the Mediwitch said unsympathetically. "You wanted to be able to take care of yourself after the moons, so you'll just have to learn to find the strength." He prodded the cut, already healing by itself anyway, making another half-hearted attempt to fix it. Nothing. The marks Livia had left were dulled to pale pink now, and Madame Pumphrey thought they would probably vanish, in time, as they weren't inherently magical wounds. "You're welcome to leave," she called to him now from her office. "If you're just going to sit there moping, go and see your friends." Remus didn't bother telling her that it was his friends, or rather one friend in particular, he was moping about. But he never thought twice when she gave permission for him to leave, so he got up and dressed quickly, hurrying out of the hospital wing. "See you Tuesday," he called on his way out. It was after lunch, and there was only one lesson left that day, care of magical creatures, which Remus wasn't much in the mood for. He was ahead of the rest of the class anyway, and no one would miss him. He sloped along the corridors aimlessly for a while, still thinking about Sirius and Emmeline, and how he was ever going to... Wait a minute. He stopped and frowned, looking at the nearest portrait. Something was very off about it. The painting depicted an elderly wizard with thinning hair and a neat little goatee peering through a large golden telescope. For some reason he was wearing an enormous bright red curly wig. It didn't seem to bother him. He just kept adjusting the sight on his contraption, murmuring quietly to himself. Remus snorted and looked at the next picture along. This one contained a group of pretty buxom young shepherdesses tending to their flock, and they all had bright red wigs on too. The same with the next portrait, a witch carrying an overflowing basket of fruit, garish scarlet curls bouncing on her head, and the next, a sinister-looking monk whose red wig actually sat on top of his hood. None of the subjects of the paintings seemed at all perturbed as Remus followed the trail of bizarre headwear to the third-floor mezzanine. "Padfoot!" Remus gasped when he found the culprit. Sirius was at ease, hands in his pockets, chatting casually to a painting of a giggly sea nymph in a large golden frame. When she saw Remus, she gave a shriek and dived into the waves below. "Oh, Moony, what do you scare her for?" Sirius tutted. "I was just about to cast the spell." "This is brilliant," Remus grinned, gesturing at all of the pictures he'd passed. "How come you never told me you were doing it? Is James in on it?" "Yeah, he's taking the east wing," Sirius nodded, moving on to the next painting. "We just had the idea walking back to bed this morning. Sorry, thought you'd be sleeping still." "Madame Pumphrey let me go." "Oh, right. You'll probably want to go to the library or something. I'm nearly finished here. No need for you to stick around." "No, Oh, shit." The big grandfather clock in the Great Hall had begun chiming. Every classroom door was about to burst open, and students come pouring out for their next lesson. "They'll know it's us," Sirius said. "Quick!" He pulled James's invisibility cloak out from his robes and raised it up like a tent. Remus hurried over to get under it, crouching slightly to compensate for their height difference. They both backed against the wall and waited. The doors began to slam open one at a time, and torrents of students filled the previously quiet space. Invisible and trapped, Remus realized that this was the best chance he'd had in days. "Oi," he whispered, directly into Sirius's ear. He felt the other boy tense. "Are you still angry with me? What do you—" "You're avoiding me." "No, I'm not." Sirius pushed back suddenly as a third-year girl came a bit too close. He backed straight into Remus's chest so that their whole bodies were now touching, practically. "James said to give you space," he murmured, "and you left me out of the Hogshead mission even after we said we'd go together." "It wasn't a mission," Remus whispered, struggling to keep his voice low. People were noticing the vandalized portraits now, pointing and laughing around them. "And I never agreed to go together." "Well, it sent the message that you wanted space," Sirius shot back. He turned around so that he could whisper into Remus's ear too. They were still touching in some places, trying not to in others. "I'm sorry, okay," Remus replied. "I didn't think you'd take it so hard." "I'm not taking it hard," Sirius spluttered, mortally offended. "You make me sound like—" "Like what?" Remus challenged. He could feel Sirius begin to pull away, so he kissed him. "Fuck it!" Thankfully, Sirius kissed him back, and as the hallways emptied once again, the noise slowly petering out, the two boys hidden in plain sight under the cloak were completely oblivious. Finally, Sirius did pull away, and Remus allowed it. "So now you like me again," Sirius grumbled. "Can't bloody keep up with you." "What are you talking about? You were avoiding me." "I thought you wanted me to." "Well, yeah, okay, I did, but not until we'd at least talked." "I really don't see what there is to talk about." Sirius threw off the cloak. His hair fell softly back into place, while Remus's was abuzz with static until he smoothed it down. "We're either doing, or we're not." "God, I love arguing with you," Remus thought, feeling the heat flare up his neck. Desire for Sirius just about burning him up. "I could argue with you forever." "So," Sirius said, backing away from Remus, knocking him out of his lustful haze, "which is it?" "Well, it's a bit unfair to ask me that right now." Sirius bit his bottom lip and cocked an eyebrow. Remus just about died. "Come on, then." Sirius jerked his head, moving towards the nearest staircase. "I'm bunking off divination. Dorm's empty." Thursday, the 10th of February, 1977. What a mess. By the end of the next week, they were basically back to the beginning again. No talking, just touching. Sirius went out publicly with Emmeline, and at night he crept into Remus's bed, provided the coast was clear, of course. Sirius was nothing if not discreet, in this case at least. Conversely, Remus was finding that part more difficult than ever. A few months ago, it would have been fine. It had been fine. Just another secret to add to the list, another part of himself that he mustn't let others see. But a lot had happened since then. Lily knew he was a werewolf, for example. That had been a surprising relief. Sharing the secret with her had been a good thing, he was quite sure. Then there was Christopher, so courageous in bearing his soul, and all Remus could offer back were half-truths. When it came down to it, Remus could face a vicious killer in a dark alley, could make demands on Dumbledore himself. But he could not say no to Sirius, a real bloody mess. In one moment of utter weakness, Remus even found himself nearly confessing everything to James. They were in the library, looking for some obscure Defense Against the Dark Arts textbook, when Potter brought up Valentine's Day, which was looming. "I'm asking Evans to Hogsmeade this weekend, obviously," he said cheerily. "She'll say no for tradition's sake, but I'm winning her over. I can feel it." Remus sighed, running his finger along the supple leather spines of the ancient texts. It wasn't that he wanted Celebrate Valentine's Day. It was a stupid, girly day which he wanted nothing to do with, but he resented everyone else wanting to do things for it. And Wormtail actually asked out Dorcas Meadows. James laughed, crouching down to check a lower shelf. Can you believe that? Sometimes I think he's got more guts than any of us. "Who's Dorcas Meadows?" "You've met her, haven't you? Hufflepuff in our year." Remus shrugged. "I suppose Sirius is taking Emmeline to Hogsmeade," he said. Yeah, 'spect so, James replied, pulling out a book and opening it to check the index. Or another one of his many adoring fans, if she dumps him before then. What? Nothing. Remus shook his head, picking up a book at random and pretending to read it. Not being a wee bit judgmental there, are you, Mooney? James wheedled, grinning. No, of course not. Remus fought to keep a straight face. Padfoot can do whatever he wants. But don't you think he's... I don't know, it's a bit much, all these girls, like he's showing off. It's not loads of girls. He's been with Emmeline since December, hasn't he? January, Remus replied archly. He was single over Christmas. Well then, that's fine. The rest are just flirting. He's always liked attention. Yeah, but... Look, you just need to let Sirius be serious. He's a bit of a twat sometimes, but he's had a rough time of it. Let him enjoy himself if he wants. James stood up and looked at him sideways, appraising. You know Mooney wouldn't kill you to have a bit of fun either. Ha! Remus snorted. Oh, mate. James leaned over his shoulder to read the book Remus had open. Well done, you've found it. Have a bit of fun. So perhaps Remus could blame it all on James. What happened next, anyway? Saturday, the 12th of February, 1977. She'd been flirting with him for ages. Remus knew pretty well what flirting looked like by now, in the way she smiled, head tilted downwards, the way she had started pressing a hand to his chest when he made her laugh, which definitely seemed to happen more than usual, too. That cute little wiggle girls do when they're fixing their tights. Eventually they found themselves alone in the common room on that Hogsmeade weekend, just before Valentine's Day, homework finished, sitting squashed up on the sofa, and she just asked. Which was more than Sirius had ever done. Remus and Mary always been good friends. He liked her a lot. Her sunny, carefree nature had always appealed to his own gloomier side, her confidence to his introversion. He had ignored the flirting altogether, finding it mildly flattering but otherwise uninteresting, until she decided to stay at the castle with him instead of going to Hogsmeade. How come you're not on a date anyway? Remus asked as they signed off the last few notes for their history essays. I wanted to spend time with you, she smiled at him, settling back into the couch, her thigh touching his. Can't have you here all lonely. I'm not as much fun as Roman Rotherhide, I bet, Remus laughed, still not quite believing the direction this was going. Her hand was on his knee. Was she going to leave it there? Oh, crikey, no, she wasn't. Well, I don't know about that, she said, her voice low, leaning into him now as her long fingers moved slowly upwards. I'd like to judge for myself. She blinked slowly and leaned in, kissing him softly on the lips. He was frozen to the spot. She smiled cheekily. Well, do you fancy it? She was very pretty. He wasn't as close to her as he was with Lily, so really, he reasoned, where was the harm? Whatever was going on with Sirius clearly didn't mean neither of them could look elsewhere, and if Sirius could do it, then so could he. Only fair. He led her upstairs. You're lovely, she whispered, lying on his bed, eyes dark. He ran his hand up her soft thigh. Between her legs, she was slick like warm oil. Afterwards, he wasn't sure what to make of it. It was certainly nothing to complain about. She was gorgeous, and the blood heat of her around him was definitely very exciting. But it wasn't the same as those dark, furtive nights with Sirius, had none of the rich complexity, the sure understanding. Mary's soft jelly breasts were no substitute for Sirius's firm grip. Her sweet, panting sighs did not arouse him in the same way as Sirius's hot, rasping groans. All things said and done, while Remus was certainly glad to have had the experience, he didn't think it was something he was much interested in repeating. Sunday, the 13th of February, 1977. Only a day after the Mary experiment, Sirius was back. It was mid-afternoon, but James and Peter were both in the library, studying for an upcoming Muggle Studies exam. It began, as ever, in silence and quiet. Desperate need. Sirius was clutching and pulling at Remus's clothes, then he rolled over and seemed to stop. He sniffed the pillow. Is that... That smells like... He inhaled again. Mary's perfume? Yeah, Remus replied uneasily. He had just removed his shirt and was feeling exposed already, not sure if they were stopping altogether or just making casual conversation. She was here, yesterday. Oh, right, you and her. Well, it was just a one-off sort of thing. Is that okay? Yeah. Sirius's eyes clouded over slightly, as if his mind was working extra fast. Yeah, of course. Good for you, mate. I know you two were, but it was ages ago now, and you're with Emmeline, so... Of course, I'm pleased for you. Honestly, Mary's great. Yeah, she is. There were a few moments of silence, and Remus considered putting his shirt back on. But then Sirius leaned over, his expression changing, like a storm passing. He touched the scar that started at Remus's collarbone, dragged his finger down along its ragged path to his navel. Remus shivered. So how was it? What? Remus just wanted to close his eyes, relax under Sirius's long fingers. Sex, Sirius said. Remus's eyes opened, confused. He wanted to know. It was good. She's, so soft, you know. I mean, you know... Yeah, Sirius breathed into his neck, half on top of him now, his hand working Remus's belt. Afterwards they sat beside each other, and all Remus wanted to do was lay his head on Sirius's burning chest and close his eyes and just be. But he didn't. He stared at his friend, who was already lighting a cigarette, skin still pink and shining, and thought to himself ruefully, this will never be enough. Chapter 109, 6th year, Heniokos. Friday, 4 March, 1977. I'm going to go mad, Marlene said one evening as the library was closing. She pressed her fingers into her eyes, exhausted. Her hair was fluffed up on her head like a dandelion from running her hands through it so often. I thought the owls were bad. That rhymes, Mary sang cheerfully, neatly rolling up her parchment. Helpful, thanks, MacDonald. Marlene rolled her eyes. You decided to keep potions. Mary bopped her friend lightly on the head with her rolled-up essay. It's a requirement for healer training college. Marlene sighed. I wish I didn't have to do it. I don't know why you all hate it so much, Lily yawned, hoisting her satchel onto her shoulder. Potions is fun. It's logical. Oh, shut up, Evans, Mary and Marlene said in unison. Remus laughed and put a fond arm around the redhead. Poor Lily, he said in mock sympathy, so misunderstood in your quest for knowledge. She laughed too, and they all left the library together. They'd been there every night of the week, except when Lily had prefect duties or Marlene had Quidditch. Then it was just Remus and Mary. Which was surprisingly okay. Mary had made a few teasing jibes about their brief liaison, but hadn't mentioned wanting to do it again, and appeared to be seeing Roman Rotherhide once more. Remus was relieved. One secret affair was quite enough. It was early to be revising, but the four of them had decided to reconvene their study group this year in order to get through the first stage of their new Ts. Final exams were still over a year away, but in Remus and Lily's opinion, there was no such thing as being too prepared, particularly with the foundation year exams due in June. I'm knackered, Mary said, as they approached the portrait of the fat lady. Her wig had been removed by Professor Flitwick only a few days beforehand. She'd apparently grown quite fond of it. Day off tomorrow. If you want, Remus said, catching her yawn. I said I'd do a big study group on Sunday, so I'd be glad of the rest. I don't know how you do it, Lupin. Mary shook her head in disbelief. That's perfect, though. Leave Saturday evening free. Got another date with Roman, have you? Marlene asked, sounding a bit annoyed. Yes, Marlene, Mary rolled her eyes. Despite your very apparent disapproval, I just think you ought to slow down, that's all, Marlene snapped, running her fingers through her hair again. Well, as we've discussed before, it's none of your business who I go out with, is it? Mary said, arching an eyebrow at her friend. Marlene had turned an uncharacteristic shade of hot pink and was looking at the floor. Remus looked at both girls in surprise. He'd never seen them talk like that to each other before. Usually they were the best of friends. Come on, we're all tired, Lily said, pushing forward. Blatherskite, she addressed the fat lady, who moved aside so they could all enter. "Evans!" James's shout met them even before they were halfway through. Yeah, good evening, Potter," Lily sighed, shaking her head. Remus caught her tiny smile, though she tried to cover it behind her long hair. "And Mooney," James continued, "where have you been?" "Making furious love to us all, obviously," Mary said, deadpan, pushing Sirius aside to sit nearest the fireplace. "It's true," Lily grinned, sitting on the hearthrug. "He's a stallion." "It took all three of us to satisfy him," Marlene piped up, looking a little bit happier. "Oh my God, please shut up." Remus groaned, taking his seat in his usual armchair. "We were in the library, as if you didn't know." "Ah, of course," James winked at him. "Say no more, Casanova." "Brr." Mary held her hands up to the fire. "This castle is freezing." "Scotland is freezing," Sirius replied monotonously. He was levitating a paper plane lazily about the room, slouched down in his chair. "It's only March," Lily said perkily. "It'll start warming up soon enough. I can't wait for the summer." "Nah, then I'll be too hot," Mary sighed. "Our flat is ridiculous, even if you open all the windows. Suppose I can do magic this year, though. Am I allowed to if my family are muggles?" "Oh, I do," Lily said, biting her lip. "Are we not supposed to?" "Why don't you come and stay with me, Mary?" Marlene said, "More room at our house. It's cooler." "Well, I wouldn't mind a holiday," Mary mused, still rubbing her hands. "Haven't had one since Dad lost his job. We used to go to the seaside every year, Margate or Skegness." "Ooh, I went to Cornwall last year," Lily said. "It was lovely. We camped right near the beach." "Camping again," Sirius grumbled. "Don't get Potter started." "Evans, have I ever told you how much love camping?" James said, grinning madly from his position at the mantelpiece. He was fiddling with his golden snitch, tossing it from palm to palm. "It is one of my greatest pleasures in life." "I'm talking about muggle camping, Potter," Lily tutted, smoothing her skirt over her knees self-consciously. "In muggle tents, no fancy extension charms." "Can't be that different," James replied, undeterred. "These two haven't even been camping." He nodded to Remus and Sirius. "We sort of did over Christmas," Remus said, throwing a daring glance at Sirius, who gave him a slow, conspiratorial smile. "Hey!" James said suddenly, tossing the snitch high in the air, then reaching to snatch it back. "We should all go camping." "What?" Sirius said, sitting up. "This summer." James nodded, excited. "It's our last summer before we all have to be grown-ups, and we'll all be of age. We should do it." "All of us?" Marlene asked, eyeing Mary. "All of us," James confirmed. "What did you think, Evans?" "Well," Lily looked up at him, "separate tents for boys and girls, right?" "Pfft, you're no fun." Mary smirked. Lily kicked her from the floor and continued, "Okay, Potter, on one condition. Anything. Muggle tents." "Oh." Saturday, 5 March 1977. If you're 17 years of age, or will turn 17 on or before the 31st of August 1977, you are eligible for a 12-week course of apparition lessons from a Ministry of Magic, Apparition Instructor, beginning on Monday the 4th of April 1977. Please sign below if you would like to participate. Cost 12 galleons. Remus stared up at the notice pinned to the Gryffindor notice board and sighed. "I'll lend you the money," Sirius said at his shoulder. "I'd rather you didn't. Remus, I'm ridiculously rich. I'm quite aware of that," he snapped irritably. He looked at the board again. Remus had wanted to learn how to apparate for almost his entire time at Hogwarts. "Okay," he nodded, "but I'll pay you back. I really will." "I know." Sirius nudged him with his hip playfully. "You're going to be making more money than any of us one day, you big swat." "Ha!" Remus snorted. "Not likely, unless Dumbledore gets his act together." "Dumbledore? What's he got to do with anything?" Remus looked around furtively. The common room wasn't busy, but it wasn't empty either. "I can't tell you here," he said. "Upstairs?" Sirius cocked his head with a mock-innocent expression that made Remus burst out laughing. "Not for that. Get your mind out of the gutter, Black." They headed up to the bedroom. It was nice and quiet there. Peter was serving a detention somewhere with Filch, and James was patrolling. "So?" Sirius went straight for Remus's bed, sitting cross-legged and alert. "What's going on with Dumbledore?" Remus sat down opposite him, not too close. Remember I had that dinner with Ferox, after I met Livia?" "Yeah, of course." Sirius sobered up at once. They hadn't discussed it since they'd made up. "Okay, well, don't get angry with me, but I sort of made some demands. On Dumbledore." Sirius stared at him, blankly. Remus continued with a hard swallow. "I told him that if they want me to help them, if they want me to be like an emissary to the werewolves or whatever, then I wanted something in return. Protection for the others in Greyback's pack, first of all." Sirius opened his mouth, then, apparently thinking better of it, closed it again and waited. Remus carried on, watching him carefully for any sign of anger or disapproval. "And I've asked not to be forced to sign the register on my birthday." "Well, that's reasonable, at least," Sirius breathed. "But Moony, the other thing—" "I know," Remus nodded. "They're murderers, some of them. I know that, but I don't think they know any other way. I think that if we want to show them that there are other choices, better ways to live, then that has to start with kindness." "Kindness?" Sirius repeated. "Not forgiveness," Remus said quickly. "I'm not saying they should go completely unpunished, but, you have to admit the Ministry has handled lycanthropy pretty poorly so far. When we win this war, there's a chance to make things better for all wizards, even half-breeds." Sirius was looking back at him, his brow very slightly furrowed, his deep blue eyes focused intensely, as if he was searching for something in Remus's face. Then he gave a slight nod. "This is really important to you, isn't it?" "Yes," Remus said without missing a beat. "You'll have to convince a lot of people." Remus nodded. "I know." "We'll help you, though," Sirius said, not breaking eye contact. "Me and Peter and James, Evans too, probably. That girl worships you." "I couldn't ask." "You don't need to." Sirius shook his head. He leaned forward and kissed Remus so gently on the lips, barely a whisper. "Anything for our Moony." Later that day, Remus was on his way to Flitwick's classroom. The kindly charms professor had allowed him to use it for his tutoring sessions, provided everything was tidied up afterwards. He had a map of the south coast in his bag and was hoping to get there early enough to have the chance to study it. If they were all going on holiday that summer, then someone was going to have to organize it. The first full moon of the summer would fall on the 1st of July, and Remus was hoping to stay one extra night at Hogwarts for that. He'd already asked James if he could stay with the Potters for the following week, and James, of course, had eagerly agreed. Then they would have the camping trip, and then— Remus didn't have a clue what his next move would be. Back to Mile End, maybe, if Grant was still there. He couldn't just stay at the Potters forever, not once he was 17. "Hiya, Remus!" Christopher waved, already waiting outside the classroom. Remus's heart sank slightly. Of course Christopher was early. He never missed a chance to catch Remus alone. "Morning, Chris," he smiled politely. "Shall we go in?" They charmed the desks into a horseshoe shape, so that there would be plenty of room for practical demonstrations, then settled down, pulling out their books. "What are you doing after?" Christopher asked, overkeen. "Dinner," Remus said mildly, smoothing down his map and locating Cornwall. "Then detention, I'm afraid. Till late." It was a full moon, though he'd be in detention even if it wasn't. McGonagall never went back on a punishment. "That's a shame," Christopher sighed. "You're always in detention these days." "Yep," Remus laughed. "I'm a no-good yob." Christopher laughed awkwardly. He meant well enough, but Remus had the impression that he was rarely comfortable with Marauder-style humour. It took getting used to. "Have you read this?" Christopher pushed a book across the desk, covering up the beach Remus had been inspecting. He sighed and looked at it. The Charioteer. "Nope." Remus shook his head, picking it up and reading the blurb. After an injury at Dunkirk, Laurie Odell is sent to a veterans' hospital to convalesce. There he befriends Andrew, a conscientious objector serving as an orderly. But when Ralph, a mentor from his school days, reappears in his life, Laurie is forced to choose between the sweet ideals of innocence and the distinct pleasures of experience. Oh, Remus thought, it's that sort of book. It's a muggle book, Christopher explained excitedly. It's really good. You can borrow it. I'd love to know what you think. Yeah, I'll give it a go. Cheers. Remus nodded, quickly hiding it in the bottom of his bag before anyone else came in. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. Both boys turned around to see Emmeline Vance poke her head around the door. She was an immensely beautiful girl with a tumble of golden curls and large apple-green eyes. Another Ravenclaw, she was a 7th year too, and had previously gone out with Roman Rotherhide himself. She smiled, stepping in. "Hello, Remus," she said in her soft, girlish voice. He tried to be polite back, but he knew he sounded cold. "Hello, Emmeline. I didn't expect you." "Oh, no, I'm not here for your little study club thing," she smiled again, scrunching up her nose in a way that might have seemed cute or endearing to anyone but Remus and Christopher. "I was hoping Sirius would be here." "He isn't." "No, I see that," she laughed throatily, sweeping her hair over one shoulder. "But he said he'd meet me in the astronomy tower half an hour ago." Remus just shrugged at her, face blank. She tutted. "Well, if you see him, will you tell him to meet me tonight, after curfew?" "He's busy tonight." "Doing what? Oh, he's not seeing that MacDonald girl again, is he?" "You never know with Sirius," Remus said cruelly, trying not to smirk. "Well, you tell him that if he's not careful, he's going to lose me." "Oh, I definitely will." She closed the door, and Remus snorted, shaking his head. "Do you actually know where he is?" Christopher asked, with a small frown. "Nah," Remus replied, "but I could guess. He's probably with James somewhere." "Those two?" Christopher sighed. "They're funny sometimes, but they cause so much trouble. How on earth Potter managed to end up a prefect, I have no idea. And Black, he's just..." "He's just what?" Remus said sharply. Christopher blinked, startled. "I know he's your friend. Sorry, I just meant he's an arrogant tosser sometimes." "Yeah," Remus nodded, loosening up. He thought about Sirius's promise, made little more than an hour ago, on Remus's bed. If other people couldn't see that Sirius, then it was their loss. Who were Emmeline and Christopher in the grand scheme of things? Not Marauders, not important. "You're not wrong," Remus shrugged. "Right, where do you want to start?" Chapter 1, 110, 6th year, 17. Thursday, the 10th of March, 1977. Happy birthday, Remus. 3 gangly, noisy, highly excitable teenage boys jumped onto Remus's bed at the crack of dawn. It was not the same as when they were 11. For one thing, Remus's legs were a lot longer. For another, they were all much heavier. "Get off, you wankers," Remus grumbled. "What time is it?" "Time is immaterial," James said, wearing a brightly coloured pointed party hat. "It's your birthday." "Your 17th birthday," Sirius added, wearing a polka-dot party hat at a rakish angle on his head. "You're of age," Peter said, lunging at Remus with a 4th hat, snapping the elastic under his chin. Remus glared at them all, stony-faced. "You're going to make me wear this all day, aren't you?" They nodded, all 3, in perfect unison, the streamers on their conical headwear bobbing and flashing in the dull morning light. "It's impervious to water," Sirius explained cheerfully, "so you can even shower with it on." He winked, and Remus hoped he wasn't blushing. Sirius had been in his bed only hours before for a very different reason, and Remus was finding the quick transitions harder and harder to deal with. Only half an hour later, and Remus had showered, hat still firmly on his head, opened about 50 birthday cards, wishing him many happy returns. "I didn't think I knew 50 people," and eaten a generous slice of Mrs. Potter's chocolate cake. "And you'll get your proper present later," James said cryptically, "at the party." "You lot are mad," Remus said as they filed down into the common room. "You shouldn't go to all this trouble." "Shut up, Mooney," Peter said good-naturedly. "Happy birthday, Remus," the girls chorused in the dining hall. They were all wearing party hats too, apparently thanks to Lily's persuasiveness. "Nice one, Evans," James winked at her, giving her a sly nod with his elbow. "Knew you wouldn't let the side down." "Oh, bugger off, Potter," she elbowed him back, looking very pleased and a bit flushed. The usual 3-round rendition of Happy Birthday accompanied Remus's birthday breakfast, and he was so used to it by now that he even stood up and gave a shy bow once they'd finally finished. Then the owls arrived. There was a card from Ferox, which was unexpected. Remus hadn't been sure if they were still on speaking terms after their last meeting. There was also a note from Dumbledore. He cracked the cherry-red seal quickly under the table and read it as fast as possible. Mr. Lupin, many happy returns for the day. I understand we have a few things to discuss. Please present yourself at the headmaster's office at 4 p.m. this afternoon. Sincerely, Albus Dumbledore. Here we go. He sighed under his breath. Sirius, who had an annoying habit of reading over his shoulder, leaned in. Do you want someone to go with you? Remus shook his head, but smiled at Sirius, trying to be kind. Nah, thanks for offering, but I think it's better if I do it alone. Sirius nodded, looking troubled all the same. The day passed slowly, the meeting with Dumbledore lurking at the end of it like some malevolent spider. Remus tried imagining the scenario over in his head, coming up with a script, or at least something coherent to say in defense of his wild demands. Nothing came to him, and at 3:45 p.m. that afternoon he found himself walking to the headmaster's office very slowly indeed. He'd been mad to even suggest this in the first place. No one else needed as reason to help in the war effort. James would never do it. But then, Remus supposed, there was nothing James wanted that Dumbledore could give him, unless Dumbledore held the key to Lily Evans's undying love. He found the staircase already open and ascended just as slowly, remembering only at the very last minute to rip the party hat from his head. Good afternoon, Mr. Lupin. Happy birthday. Dumbledore was sitting at his desk, as usual. This time he wasn't writing letters. He was waiting patiently, a benign smile on his face. Thanks, Remus replied warily, sitting down in the chair opposite. He thought for a moment before saying, Do you mind just calling me Remus? As you wish, Dumbledore nodded. He seemed to be in good humour. How does it feel coming of age? It's okay. I have a few things for you sent on to me from Mrs. Orwell. Matron? Indeed. Dumbledore gestured at a shoebox, which seemed to have appeared on the large mahogany desk out on thin air. I believe there are a few items in there which belong to you, which were held in trust at St. Edmund's S. Oh, wow! Remus touched the lid of the box tentatively, but didn't open it. He wanted to be alone for that. There is also that matter of your inheritance. My what? Your father left a will. He left some provisions for your mother and the rest to you. He was not a wealthy man, I should say, but nevertheless, his vault in Gringotts now belongs to you. Dumbledore pulled a key from his pocket and passed it across the desk. Remus held it in his hand and thought about Lyle, who had not been on his mind in some months. Thank you, he said, remembering his manners, and there are other legal matters as well, you know. Dumbledore clasped his hands in front of him, long, slender fingers intertwined. He was waiting for a response. The register, Remus said. The register? The headmaster agreed. He pulled out a piece of parchment and pushed that across the desk too. It was a form. Ministry of Magic, Declaration of Lycanthropic Infection. Remus felt queasy. There was a dotted line at the bottom, awaiting his signature. He sat on his hands and looked at Dumbledore. What do you want me to do with it? Leo Ferox led me to believe that you already had a very good idea of what to do with it, Remus. The old man replied, his eyes serious. You're an adult. I leave it in your hands. Remus picked up the parchment immediately, held it up to eye level, and tore it clean in two. Dumbledore smiled again. Admirably done. Ferox told you something else, though, Remus said, trying to maintain eye contact but finding it extremely difficult. Dumbledore was not like anyone else. He smelled just as strongly of magic as every other witch or wizard, but nothing else. He had no unique signifier at all. He did. I think perhaps you can anticipate my response. Remus felt something deflate inside of him, making room for the coming rage. So it's a no, he said flatly. Dumbledore inclined his head gently. Not entirely. A request for patience, perhaps. With respect, Remus heard the hardness in his own voice, and it surprised him but made him braver. There isn't time for patience. There never is when one is young, Dumbledore replied softly. Remus, I know how things must seem to you, believe me. You didn't see her. They're suffering, right now. Many people are suffering, Remus. You have spent precious little time in the wizarding world yet. Whose fault is that? Remus muttered fiercely. Dumbledore gave him a silencing glance. But once you have, you will see, you will understand why attitudes are a very long way from changing. What you are asking... What about what you're asking? Remus shouted, incandescent. Of Ferox and Moody and the Potters and... I am asking for an enormous leap of faith, Dumbledore said very loudly. He didn't shout. You couldn't call it shouting at all, but it was no longer kind. From many people, and I will keep asking until the war is won. That must be our focus, for now. I want to win the war, Remus said, still trying to control his volume, as much as anyone. But I want something worth winning too. In time, when we have the resources, when we have the strength to fight another battle. I want a promise. I'm aware of that, Dumbledore said, his voice changing almost imperceptibly, a deep frown lining his forehead. I cannot give you one. Fine. Remus stood. Then I'm promising you. I'm not giving up. He was furious, and Dumbledore had the gall to smile at him. I would expect no less from Lyle Lupin's son. Remus wanted to scream, fuck you, but decided that as he'd already been disowned from one institution today, it was probably best to avoid any risk on expulsion. He grabbed the shoebox, turned and marched out. Remus was practically blind with rage as he pelted down the spiral staircase from Dumbledore's office, shoebox under his arm, head bowed, so that he ran straight into Sirius, waiting at the bottom. Whoa, Sirius said, pushing both hands against Remus's chest in an attempt to slow him down. What's up, Moony? What are you doing here? Remus snarled. Just waiting for you. I know you didn't want company, I just thought... You never bloody listen, Remus ranted, pushing past. Sirius grabbed his arm and wouldn't let go, allowing Remus to half drag him along the corridor. I know, I'm terrible, he was saying, jogging slightly to keep up with Remus's longer strides. Never do as I'm told, do I? Keep shouting at me. I deserve it. Hey, want to hit me? Remus stopped and looked at him, the mercurial grin on his face, that Sirius Black grin. No, I don't want to hit you. Oh, good. Want to punch a wall? No. Remus carried on walking a bit slower. Want to get stoned? No. Drunk? Maybe. Perfect, Sirius said. They were now walking at a regular pace towards the dining hall. Because I think that's what half the school has in mind after dinner. What's in the box? It's... Remus held it on both hands now. It wasn't very heavy. There couldn't be much. He could feel leaves of paper sliding around inside. Just some stuff. I think my dad left to me. I'm not opening it until later. Sirius shrugged easily. Fair enough. Sirius's general loveliness continued through dinner sausages and mash with onion gravy until dessert when Emmeline appeared. Remus had been halfway to a good mood when she showed up at their table and squeezed herself onto Sirius's lap. She kissed him full on the mouth for a long time. Happy birthday, Remus, she smiled politely once they had finished. He nodded in response and set down his spoon. She didn't seem to notice. I'm so excited about the party, she said generally to the table. Should be good, James said jovially. Moony's birthdays always are. Why does everyone call you Moony anyway? Emmeline asked, looking at Remus. He scowled at her. Not everyone, just my friends. She blinked and frowned, the creases in her brow marring her beauty only momentarily. Sirius squeezed her waist. Hey, Em, why don't I meet you later? We've got some stuff to do to get ready. Okay, she smiled again. Remember your promise. She snogged him again. Promise? Remus asked, upstairs in their bedroom 15 minutes later. James and Peter were overseeing the decorations in the common room, and Sirius had made up some excuse for not helping. What did you promise her? Oh, just that I'd walk her back to her common room after the party. Remus raised an eyebrow. Via the astronomy tower. Sirius laughed, unbuttoning his shirt to change. Maybe. Why? Nothing. Remus sat on his bed. The shoebox was still unopened on his bedside table. He wasn't going to look today, maybe not even tomorrow. "What about you and Mary?" Sirius asked, selecting a clean black shirt from his messy chest of drawers. "That thing finished now, or what?" "Yeah." Remus nodded, watching him. "This is it," he thought. "This is when you tell him. It was just an experiment, sort of. Do you know what I mean?" Sirius murmured, more focused on buttoning up his shirt. "What, wasn't good?" "It was okay, not as good as—" He swallowed and said it fast. "Not as good as when it's just you and me." Sirius looked up from his buttons, staring at Remus across the room. Remus was grateful for the distance. Sirius's expression was hard to read, so Remus pressed on. "Is it like that for you?" Sirius returned to his dresser, looking for jeans now. His back turned, he said quietly. "Yeah." "Pardon?" Remus said, raising his voice. Sirius sighed but didn't turn around. He closed the drawer, apparently deciding that the jeans he had on would do. "I said yeah. It's better with you." "Right." Remus was so surprised by this response that he couldn't think of anything else to say. Unfortunately, this gave Sirius an opportunity to speak instead. He turned, sweeping his long hair back over his head casually. "I suppose because we know each other so well, eh? Right, I'd better get down there and help, before Prongs comes after me with a jelly legs jinx. We'll send Peter to get you when it's all ready." With that, Sirius disappeared down the stairs. 4 hours later, and Remus was well and truly drunk. Not drunk, pissed, bladdered, trolleyed, paralytic. He couldn't remember how much he'd had, and he didn't care. He was going to have a good time if it killed him. Fuck Dumbledore. Fuck Greyback, Ferox, Livia, Emmeline, and Sirius fucking Black. The party was in full swing, everyone now wearing a shiny, pointy birthday hat, bopping along to the blaring music. Remus hadn't even minded the disco tracks. He staggered to his armchair and sank into it with yet another bottle of something lovely and strong. He was feeling very warm and very sleepy. Lazily, he allowed his gaze to wander to Sirius, chattering by the turntable, hips slouched forward just so. Remus let himself stare for just a little bit. He was entitled. Their first kiss was exactly a year ago. It was a silly little anniversary, considering everything that had happened in between, but Remus felt a small purr of satisfaction all the same. Fucking prick. "Him and Emmeline have been together a while now," Lily said to Remus, coming to sit on the armrest. Her eyes were wide and unfocused. She had an easy smile. Remus carefully took control of his facial features and smiled back at her as if he hadn't a care in the world. "You sound surprised." "Well, I am a bit. I didn't see him as the sort of bloke who wants a regular girl." Remus shrugged, because he couldn't speak without saying too much. Lily carried on regardless. "And I know it sounds horrible, and I know he's your friend, so just tell me to shut up. But I did sort of think, that he's only going out with her to upset his family." "What do you mean?" Remus asked, taking a very long swig from his fire whiskey. "Oh, Lily slurred, maybe even drunker than he was. "Everyone knows Black's on a weird crusade against his mum. Never goes with pure-blood girls. There was Mary." She started counting Sirius's conquests off on her fingers. "She's Muggle-born, Evangelina, Florence, Avni, now Emmeline." Might just be a coincidence. Remus was worried he might not be able to control his voice much longer. It was getting horribly high and nervous. "Pfft," Lily laughed, spilling some of her own drink. "Sirius Black never does anything by coincidence. It's all calculated with him." She chuckled to herself, raising her goblet to her lips. He'd shag a vampire if there was one at Hogwarts. Remus stood up very suddenly, knuckles cracking. Lily almost fell off the arm of the couch in fright. "What's up?" she asked, confused, looking blearily up at him. I'm going to be sick," Remus said, realizing that he really was. He bolted away and up the stairs as fast as he could and stumbled into the bathroom just in time, retching into the toilet bowl. He rocked back on his ankles, sweating and cold. He'd drunk too much. Now he just wanted to lie down and sleep and not think about anything. Remus brushed his teeth and washed his face in cold water. He felt less queasy, but no less sober. He pulled on his pajama bottoms and opened the door. Sirius was standing on the other side, leaning against his bedpost with his hands in his pockets. He looked so thoroughly himself. Their eyes met and held. Sirius broke first. "Came up to check you're all right." Remus closed the door behind him, stepping forward. "Yeah," he replied warily. "Just a bit too pissed, that's all. Going to bed." "Look, about the stuff I said," Sirius started. Remus braced himself, not sure what was coming. "I'm really sorry," Sirius said helplessly. "I don't even know why I am, but I'm just sorry, okay?" He placed a hand on Remus's shoulder, seemingly in an apologetic gesture. It was hot on Remus's bare skin, but he didn't shrug it away. He just hoped that they might finally part and he could go to bed. Sirius would return downstairs to the party, but instead Sirius kissed him. Feeling a fool, Remus kissed him back, hungrily, toothpaste and whiskey. Sirius pushed forward, stumbling slightly, and leaned heavily on Remus, gripping both his shoulders now. Remus pulled away, suddenly remembering what was wrong. "You're drunk," he said. "Yeah," Sirius slurred, grinning. "So are you." "Yeah," Remus agreed. He pulled back, leaving Sirius to balance by himself. He rubbed the back of his head. "I don't think we should. I think you'll regret it." "Since when do you care?" Sirius purred, leaning in again. Remus stepped back, sharply, pressing his hand to Sirius's chest to keep him at bay. "No, Sirius. What about Emmeline?" Sirius shook his head dizzily, frowning. "Fuck Emmeline," he grunted. Remus rolled his eyes. "But you already do, don't you, Black? That's the problem." "So," Sirius spoke slowly, mind foggy with drink, "we have to stop our thing just because of her." "Our thing? God, Sirius, you're unbelievable." "What?" "Sigh." Emmeline's tipsy voice echoed up the staircase. "Where are you?" They both turned, looking down into the shadows. "You'd better go to her," Remus said, walking over to his bed. Sirius followed him like a lost puppy, pulling at the waistband of his pajama bottoms needily. "Come on, just... No." "Sirius, I'm coming to get you." Remus pushed him away one last time. "Go on, I don't want her up here." Sirius stared at him for a bit longer, drink still blurring his reactions, making him slow and stupid. "Okay, but I'll come back, we can talk." "No," Remus said again. "We've talked, it's over. Good night, Sirius."